Hello and welcome back. This is Don't Watch at Night, a spooky little podcast dedicated to Spanish language horror and Latin American horror. I'm your host, Valerie.
And I'm Veronica.
Yes, and we are joined today for book club episode by our friend of the show, Perla Caballero.
Yeah.
Buenas noches. Hello. Happy New Year. Esta señora is here to welcome us all in. Thank you again for welcoming
back.
me back. Yeah. Oh my gosh. You guys sent me this email. I'm like, you want me back again? I didn't scare you away. Let me try harder.
You are here celebrating our 40th episode with us.
I know. And congratulations to you both. I know the pain that it is to have a podcast, work a podcast. That's why I've never launched my own. I'm a perfect guest for that reason. So congratulations on 40th, La Cuarenta, as I was saying it in my head. If we were together, I would have totally had like some Costco cake and some champagne. And been like,
Oh, man.
So tell us before we launch into anything, what's new with you? What's going on with you?
Perla has the biggest news.
Oh yeah. So I like I did my divorce. I kept my engagement and wedding entirely off of social media until it was after the fact. So on November 16th, I was asked to my hand in marriage. He was also kind enough to tell me to go get a manicure. Like, you should go get a manicure before dinner.
So he was pictures.
Yeah, exactly. And then, the observant area in me, the Aries in me, was noticing phone calls were happening. And so I was like, okay, I need to stop paying attention because I'm going to ruin it. And so I was just like, hey, so at dinner, do you think something like major is going to happen? Like, what level of like makeup should I put on? And he's like, the absolute best. I'm like, okay. And I start crying a little. And then a German opera started playing really loud. He's like, oh, she's freaking out. So yeah, he was in a very busy restaurant called the Radiator Whiskey. If you're ever in Seattle, I highly recommend it. He whispered in my ear and told me that it was time for us to put a relationship to the next level. And he was entirely in love with me. And I want to also point out the people listening to this episode and watching it, he heard my voice on a podcast and reached out to me.
Oh my God.
Wow.
What was the podcast? Wait, what was the podcast? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, we need all the deets now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a defunct podcast, but I'll tell you later. I'll tell you off book because they're.
Well, it must be said. It must be said. Your dress was amazing.
Yes, you look.
Thank you. I bought that off the rack, and everything else was a vintage piece. I'll share a photo for you guys to post so you guys can share it with our fans. And so we wanted to get married New Year's Eve, and this is how you know it's a second marriage for me. When I was like, well, if I put you in my docs and you're gonna mess me up, and I'm already going on your health insurance, so why don't we just get married January, the first Friday in January? We're like, great. So his grandma, that is in her 80s, flew out from Iowa, so she was really sweet after the ceremony. She was like, you have a grandma, and all my grandparents have passed away, so it was really sweet to see like his family from Iowa travel. My parents came up from California. My best friend, who I built our relationship watching repeats of David Lynch Lost Highway. He came up, he was in our bridal party. My two friends from Portland came. So we had a very like under 30 for Latinos. That's like tiny.
Yeah.
But I'm marrying a white boy from Iowa. So and his family's just as big. So we're doing a reception in Iowa. If you want to come, you're more than welcome to. It's like north to you guys. But yeah, so I got married. We picked our judge because she spoke Spanish and she was able to do the ceremony in English and Spanish and say my middle name, which is Xochitl, without even missing a beat. And that's where the X in Perla Xochitl comes from. Yeah. Or Perla X, PX Caballero in my socials. And then, so we had a Costco cake, which I really recommend. There was no cake left behind. And we got married. And I think the funniest thing I said was when we were signing our marriage license, I was like, holy shit, I got married. So yeah, and then I'm still running my book club and Morbid Curiosity. Yeah, West Seattle. We never did a virtual because the members were like, no, we really want to do these in person. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I got to start planning. So I've been doing a lot of that, and then just avoiding the big dark, and there's a nightmare outside. So we're just just trying to stay positive. And
so I do want to point out, yes, at the time that this episode is getting released, at the time that you're listening to this, it is that day.
Here in the States.
That day of darkness. And so we encourage you to listen to us instead. Watch us instead.
Yeah. And then actually the David Lynch Foundation, God rest your soul, sweet gentleman. They have recommended at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to meditate for 10 minutes. And if you have the Calm app, which I highly recommend, do the daily Calm and just turn your brain off. And you get, I call it my little mini nap because I always fall asleep. But they do like, hey, wake up, they bring you back. And just, and it's been released that David Lynch passed away meditating, which is, if you know anything about him, he was a big fan of transcendental meditation. So the fact that he left this physical being doing what he loved and always was compassionate about. So yeah, definitely listen to this episode. Follow me if you want dog photos.
Aw.
Yeah. And and he's going to come up. He's going to come up for sure as we work through talking about the book because it's going to come up for sure. I don't want you guys to worry because it's already at the time that people listen to this episode, there will be a disclaimer or not a disclaimer, but a warning beforehand, warning people that this is a book club episode. But we're going to do it again here. Just FYI, it's a book club episode. If you haven't read the book, then be comfortable with the fact that we're about to ruin it for you. So, but before we get into that,
second read too, by the way, if you still read the book, I highly recommend reading it because when I was preparing, I had to go back and reread some chapters. I'm like, oh, I totally missed that part. So, did you do an something that you said earlier gave me the impression that you did audiobook at one point. Did you do any audio or no? No, the first chapter made me go like, I got to read this one. I can't have that internal going. I do audiobooks back and forth. I like to take
the opposite. I read the first chapter and then after that I was like, no, I gotta have somebody else read this to me.
That first chapter was brutal. I was like, I was ready. I was like, man, you guys really know how to pick them, don't you? You like to traumatize me.
I have 5 bullet points just on chapter 1, so we'll get there. But before we do, I have a fun game to kind of open us up, and then we're going to launch into talking about the cocktails. So the game we're playing today, ladies, is called Can You Guess the Horror Story from Just One Quote? And so you guys are working together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the quotes.
Man. Okay.
And then I'm going to read you the options, okay? It's going to be multiple choice. You can pick out. Now,
I do want choice.
I want to let you both know beforehand. This quiz is circa 2015. So this is pre the revelations of a certain author in, what is it, The New Yorker? Was it The New Yorker? Where that
The New York Magazine. The New York
Magazine. Okay. So that particular author. So he does make an appearance in this quiz. And so FYI on that. His name, do you know who I'm talking about, Ron?
No, I was going to say, I'm always out of the loop. So I'm like,
Neil Gaiman and his terrible wife, Amanda Palmer.
Neil Gaiman and his unfortunate ways. So and that is a shame. But we're going to move on. We're going to play the quiz anyway. So are you guys ready?
Ready.
Okay, here we go. So question 1. What horror novel is this line from? Listen to the quote.
Rachel's... Are they novels or books? I mean, books or movies?
They're books. These are books. So book club episode. I went and found us a horror book club quiz. So here we go. Here's the quote. Rachel's voice was grating, full of dirt. Darling, it said. Is it from Pet Sematary by Stephen King, The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, or The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson?
I'm going to go with Pet Sematary.
Rachel?
That's a big tip off.
Well, I don't know. I'll go with what Perla says because I have no clue.
Okay, it is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Rachel is the name of the wife, right?
I was trying to remember her name. Was it Rachel? I don't know.
This sounds terrible. I've never read Horror King. I've only read his publications on Hard Case Crime, but I do know like the movie. And that was scary.
I am familiar with that book only because as people who have listened to this podcast from the beginning, that movie scarred me emotionally when I was like a child. So I know that book.
Yeah. Okay. Little Gabe.
Here's the next one. This might be a little bit trickier, but like I said, I'm going to give you the short choice options, the multiple choice options. Here we go. This is from a short story. Which short story is this horrifying description from? I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly round, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Is it from Click Clack the Rattle Bag by Neil Gaiman, The Color or Color Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft, or I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison?
God.
You can just blind guess if you don't know. This one was a hard one. I didn't get this one either. I didn't know this one
I don't think it's Gaiman. That doesn't sound like.
I think it's H.P. Lovecraft Color.
I was gonna say
because because they kind of work into these kind of blobby things.
Okay.
It is.
It is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. But that was a good guess. That was a good guess. I would have guessed H.P. Lovecraft as well. So
yeah, because color is messed up. Like even in H.P. Lovecraft, like we can't like we need to drag his ass too. He's a bad person too. So I mean, we're not leaving anybody behind.
No. Okay.
There's a book just random. There's a booktuber on YouTube that she has like a whole series that she calls authors behaving badly, and so she just like rips into.
Does she have a special on Janine Cummings? Ooh.
I don't know.
Okay, here we go.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
I do not know whence this troubling thought. Okay, so this is the quote. Loneliness will sit over our roofs with brooding wings. Is it from Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Dracula by Bram Stoker, or Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu? If I'm saying the right.
Read it again. The little quote.
Loneliness will sit over our roofs with brooding wings. I can't remember which one this was. I have taken this quiz ahead of you guys because, you know,
Mary
I'm
Shelley?
the facilitator. I don't remember which one it was.
Loneliness will sit.
Is it Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Dracula by Bram Stoker, or Carmilla by Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu?
I've never read Carmilla, and I've read the other two so long ago. So long ago. Decades.
Oh, I'm going to go with Dracula because that is his big thing is he yearns and he's so...
You are correct. It is Dracula.
Yes. Nosferatu for me. Yes, Feratu.
Okay. All right, here we go. What chilling work gave us this line? I like to dissect girls. Is it from American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis? The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. Silence of the Lambs, I'm sorry. Or is it Carry On Comfort by Dan Simmons? And the line is, I like to dissect girls.
I'm going to go with American Psycho because
you are correct.
Oh, yes. I must sound like a psychopath to your fans. I am so sorry. That's also like my gateway horror book is Bret Easton Ellis. I read Less Than Zero, and then I read American Psycho, and then I couldn't read horror for like a year because I was so afraid. Like the man's gonna get me.
On the topic of American Psycho, they're rebooting that movie, aren't they?
They're terrible idea. Terrible idea. Didn't we all watch American Psycho 2 and think we should never do that?
I didn't watch American Psycho 2. I'm not real big on sequels in general unless there's like a reason for it. So I was just like, I don't see like American Psycho as a film. I thought was sorry, I hit my mic. Was interesting. And so then I was just like, I don't think we need an American Psycho 2. And who was it? It was like
Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Christian Bale was in the first one,
but then Mila Kunis is in the second one, and she has a voiceover. If you ever want like a good riffing, make fun of that, like have some people over for party and like, hey, you want to watch a terrible movie and giggle at it? This is your movie. It is terrible.
Probably not the vibe they were going for. I'm sure.
No, they were
giggle, get together and giggle.
Austin Butler is poised to star in the American Psycho reboot. So,
wow.
Which I guess I could see. He is quite psycho.
Yeah, maybe he'll make it good. Maybe he'll make it better.
But he still has like the Elvis in him, so it'll be really interesting. I mean, and that's what happens with actors. It's like they work on these accents so well that it becomes them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, little hints of what we're gonna get into. And I mean, when he accepted the Golden Globe, he did it in the Elvis accent because he couldn't let it go.
I don't even remember it. I have to go back and listen to it. Okay, next question. Here we go. This one's a tough one. I don't remember what the answer was for this either. Game. No, hang on. What book is this unsettling line from? If I could have broken his... this is a great line, by the way. I loved it when I read it. If I could have broken his neck, I would have, just for the pleasure of the silence after the snap. Is it from The Ritual by Adam Neville, The Cipher by Kathy Koja, or The Ruins by Scott Smith?
Wasn't that the movie we just watched?
Well, we watched The Ritual.
The Ritual, yeah.
Which is based off of a book.
I don't know. I haven't read these books.
I believe it's The Cipher. That's my guess. I don't remember. But I
think
think it's
The Ritual.
Are we all going with something different?
I'll say The Ruins just so we could do 1, 2, 3.
Guessing.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Here we go. It is The Cipher. The Cipher by Kathy Koja, if I'm saying that right. It's a great line. I love that line.
It is. I'm gonna say this is like I've had this intrusive thought, I think. Quite often.
Well, now who's the psycho?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Is there a reason? I mean, like, are you going to tell me next that you really like the Jailhouse song from Chicago?
That is a good song.
It is a good
Although
song.
my intrusive thought doesn't involve breaking necks, it involves like whacking people in the head with a 2x4.
Oh my.
But
you would really like my current book called All That Is Wicked. He kills his wife with a mortar and pestle, and that is the big plot of the book. Yeah.
Okay, what short story produced this moment of horror? For a long while, we just stood there looking down at the profound and fleshless grin. Is it from The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, the infamous Bingle Ming by Rajesh Parameswaran? I'm sorry, I'm butchering this. Parameswaran? Or is it from A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner? And I'll read it again. For a long while, we just stood there looking down at the profound and fleshless grin.
God, I'm not a big
I'm
going
to go with A Rose for Emily because Yellow Wallpaper is a woman talking to herself the entire time. Great book to read when you're post-divorce and got out of it. Great book, along with Possession. Highly recommend them. If you're going through a divorce, watch The Brood after the divorce. After the divorce. Watch The Brood. Read Yellow Wallpaper. And watch Possession. So I'm gonna go.
The Brood is Veronica's like trauma movie.
Yes, from my childhood.
That movie's divorce, and it's funny. Like I watched it during my marriage, and I was like, that's about divorce. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, oh, it's right there. And it's not even like the part that you think it would be. I like all my divorce friends like it's right there, right? Yeah. No, that's a Cronenberg. Have you ever watched Rabid? Anyways, totally. No. But I'm gonna go with the Rose. The Rose for
Emily.
You
are correct. It is A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner. Okay, we're getting down towards the end. Which Edgar Allan Poe story gave us this classic line? I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. Is it from Morella, The Telltale Heart, or The Black Cat?
Telltale Heart.
You are correct. It is The Telltale Heart. You guys know your Poe.
I just listened to all those short stories right after I finished watching the new Fall of the House of Usher.
Yeah. Did you catch that,
those?
Okay.
No, I haven't watched any of the new ones. I should, but I just haven't. I do want to. Mike Nichols. And I mean, I watched the original House of Usher with Vincent Price, and that was pretty good. So yeah, I should watch them. Yeah. I have all this time on my hands now, so you know.
Okay, here we go. Okay, this is another one that mentions he who shall not be named. Two of them, actually, there's two here who shall not be named, but we're going to mention them. Which short story has this as the opening? I do not know what manner of thing she is. None of us do. Is it from The Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft, Snow, Glass, Apples by Neil Gaiman, or Out of Skin by Emily Carroll? I do not know what manner of thing she is. None of us do.
What was the first option again?
The either Dunwich or Dunwich Horror, but I think it's Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft, Snow, Glass, Apples by Neil Gaiman, or Out of Skin by Emily Carroll.
Out of Skin?
It is Snow, Glass, Apples by that dude.
Oh, moving on. And next.
Yes. And next. Which novel includes this beautiful, frightening statement? I'm a gentleman. death in silken lace, come to put out the candles, the canker in the heart of the rose. Is it from, this should be so easy. If you're just guessing, this should be so easy. Anno Dracula by Kim Newman, The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice, or The Woman in Black by Susan Hill? I'm Gentleman Death in silken lace, come to put out the
Dracula
candle.
one.
I'm going to go with Anne Rice.
It is Anne Rice.
Yeah.
It is The Vampire Lestat. So collectively,
Anne Rice love putting in a good costume line. That's why I loved her books.
No, yeah. I mean, it's that I'm the Gentleman Death in silken lace, come to put out the candles. I mean, that's Lestat. So absolutely, Vampire Lestat. We are collectively the masters of fright. When it comes to all that is gruesome, horrific, and frightening, no one holds a candle to us, or a crucifix for that matter.
Oh, Perla. Nobody holds a candle to Perla.
That's right.
I do have, I mean, it's at a line, but I do have my Guadalupe upstairs. So yeah. No, I don't know why. I definitely remember it was in around 2016, 2017 that I was like, I just get into horror. And then 2020, I was like, I should probably start watching these movies because I can't read because my mind is everywhere. But yeah, it's the darkness is outside. So why don't you just bring it in?
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, let's move on. Let me do my quick spiel on the cocktails and then we'll get into it. So, ladies and listeners, we are working with this is essentially a daiquiri that we're working with. Did you make it? Okay. Yeah,
I tried. My nice husband attempted to, so I don't know. It's we're there.
Good. So, okay, this I want you to follow this with me because I know it seems like a random drink to anyone who saw us post about it this week, but it's not random. It was very thoughtfully curated, and I'm going to tell you why. So this cocktail is definitely part of the daiquiri family. And as you can probably guess, we tweaked the name of it to fit this book club. So normally what this is called a Weekend at the Waldorf. And it's supposedly named after the 1945 film of the same name. It's like a comedy musical, I think, called Weekend at Waldorf. So the reason why we went with this is because there is a very lovely bar and grill called, I think it's called Herbs and Rye in Las Vegas. And they have this on their bar menu. And and if you go to their Instagram, they have it all over their Instagram, the Weekend at Waldorf cocktails. So it's basically like a featured cocktail of theirs. So I was like, well, we got to start there. I also personally, I associate daiquiris for whatever reason. I associate them with like 1950s, 60s America. I don't know why. I don't know I don't know if that's written somewhere, but I feel like it was a popular drink of the 60s because I know it's the 60s where where like the Mai Tai had a heyday, and the Mai Tai is another daiquiri. So
yeah, it's also when the rum trade really picked up as well. And also it's around the time when the Cubans were starting to emigrate, Cubans and people of like, the islands and so forth. So we had the Dominicans and the Haitians, and so that they drink rum, they love el rum. I end up making a fool out of myself when I drink el rum. So that's another reason why, because it's also, if you look at the music, like what was going on, the bossa nova was getting big, the lounges were getting big. I mean, and it wasn't even just the United States; it was also Mexico was getting that infiltration. So you are on the right path of thinking like 60s is a big rum era. It's like the 40s, the 20s was like bathtub gin. The 40s was whatever we could drink because we're at war. So it was a more time of people. They were drinking rum, and daiquiris were they were extremely popular.
Yes. And I kind of associate that same time period with being a very popular heyday for cities like Las Vegas, which is kind of like this destination city, the way that a lot of Americans think of it. So it's just, like that's when you have that's when you have the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. So I feel like
Ocean's 11 was around that time. Good New Year's Eve movie if you want to watch one.
Yeah. So, okay. So, and I also look at like I said, daiquiris is a quintessential vacation drink. Vegas has kind of long been considered a tourism destination spot. So it kind of felt like a natural go-to there. And like I said, we do take our drink inspiration from what the offerings are at Herbs and Rye. When next you are in Vegas, you can go check it out. You can go check out that bar. So I do just want to read you guys a little bit of a snippet, if you will entertain me, from the Cocktail Codex book. I'm holding it up. By the way, guys, we haven't said, but this is a video episode. So if you are a part of our Patreon, you will get this video episode as early as Sunday. You get your episodes a day early. So this is Cocktail Codex by Death & Co., by the people who operate the Death & Co. bars. And so I'm just going to read to you this little snippet on daiquiris, if I may. Hold on, I have to find. The daiquiri has enjoyed sensational popularity, with the unfortunate side effect that this simple sour-style cocktail often manifests as a blender catastrophe. Though a frozen daiquiri blended with a produce stand of fresh fruits can be plenty tasty, the classic daiquiri is a modest combination of rum, lime juice, and sugar shaken and served up, and versions of the classic recipe can be found in countless vintage cocktail books. So that's kind of what we're going with. And the core element, like they just said, of any daiquiri is going to be the rum. And I am working with, I think it's called Flor de Cana, which is I'm working with their white rum. But if you can, I'm hearing dog barking. But if you can, there is also a rum called Cava. Hold on, let me find it. There is also a rum called, where the hell is it? Cana Brava. If you can find that rum. I couldn't find it. My local liquor store didn't have it. And so that's apparently a really good rum specifically for mixing drinks with, because while it's great if you want to work with a nice sippable rum, you don't necessarily need to. Sometimes those sippable rums are higher price points. So a Cana Brava, or like what I have, Flor de Cana, those are good rums that are, good middle of the road prices that aren't going to break the bank. So I just want to run through the recipe real quick for those of you who are not following us on social media, but you really should, because we post this stuff ahead of time so that you can be drinking your cocktails as you're listening to book club. So the weekend at it's either Alicia or Alicia, and we talked about this before. So depending on how you want to pronounce it, it's 2 whole strawberries that you're going to muddle in a cocktail shaker, 2 ounces of white rum, 3/4 ounces of like a orange liqueur or an orange is it curacao?
Curacao.
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 Okay.
And
the person at the liquor store corrected me. I'm like, all right, you feel special.
And 3/4 ounce fresh lemon juice. So I didn't get a chance to try this drink beforehand. I went in blind. It's really tasty. How do you like it, Perla?
I'm going to taste it right now. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. I was worried.
So this spells trouble.
Okay.
I could have 3 of these and I would end up telling the darkest stories I learned while making tamales. Like
the darkest stories.
That's the best chisme is Navidad tamales, get the tias wired up, and
there you go.
All the family secrets come out.
Oh, they come running out.
If you're at our family tamaladas, our tias will lecture you if your tamales don't look beautiful. You're gonna get a talking to. You're gonna get pulled from the lineup.
Yeah, that's why I'm the packer. I'm like, I didn't do it. I just put it in the. No, it's really good. It's sweet, but not like a really, you know what I mean? It's like a sweetness. Right. It's a very simple. It's got the taste of the sour from the lemon.
Mm-hmm.
This is really good.
It is really good. And I was a little worried because of what you said, because there's nowhere. And if you're someone who likes sweeter drinks, then maybe dress up those strawberries in like a strawberry infused simple syrup. But I was worried about that. I was like, there's really not enough of a sugar component. How's this going to come out? It tastes good. I think it tastes good.
I think the orange curacao it's a liqueur, so it's a more sweeter. Because when I opened the bottle, I was like, "Oh, hello." It is. It is, and it's full body too. It isn't like what's like a drink that, I don't know, a Midori sour where you just make a face every time you drink it. Like
tart face.
Yeah.
Yeah, so keep that in mind. Now you're supposed to garnish with like a dehydrated lime wheel, and I forgot to pick them up at the. I'm so mad because I specifically chose it, guys. If you go and you look like a dehydrated lime wheel looks to me like something that has been turned inside out. It looks like something that is bloody and gross, like something that you would see in the walls of the Alicia. So I was just like, this is perfect. And then I forgot to buy it and I was so mad.
Or, some body parts that the mother had that scene. I was like, shouldn't have had breakfast right about now. That was a bad mistake.
So yes. So let me just make sure I do want to give you guys a little bit of history on what, like I said, this is our take on the Weekend at the Waldorf cocktail, which is a riff on the Waldorf. Well, I can't say that word. Waldorf. That's what it is. It's a riff on the Waldorf, which is a Prohibition era cocktail that first came to be in like the early 20th century. And for those of you who haven't had one before, a Waldorf is considerably harder. So that one, just to round my bases here, it's kind of like a Manhattan. The big difference is going to be that you're going to do an absinthe rinse on your glass before you pour your cocktail. So a Waldorf is the absinthe rinse. It's a rye, sweet vermouth, and Angostura bitters. And that's it. There's nothing else to it. So this is obviously the baby sister to Big Brother Waldorf. This is our Carmen to the Waldorf's Alvaro. So
Right, yeah. I do love a Manhattan. That is my favorite cocktail of all time, and it takes. You have to have a certain kind of palate, because I'll be like, yeah, drink a Manhattan. Somebody will be like, not for me, or they'll just drink it fast. I'm like, so you're supposed to sip on that cocktail, because that is a lot of booze coming at you.
It's a lot of booze. Yeah, a Waldorf and a Manhattan. Those are harder cocktails, and you just want to be. The first time I ever tried a Manhattan was in college, and I couldn't finish it. I wasn't ready. My palate wasn't ready for it back then, and so
Yeah.
I've grown to appreciate it.
It wasn't until it was actually a week after my 30th birthday that I had my first Manhattan, and I was like, oh, vodka, we are breaking up, honey. And I've been a fan ever since. I actually haven't had a Manhattan, and I put on all this good makeup for y'all, so maybe I'll ask that nice looking husband of mine over there to take me out on a Manhattan.
There you go.
Wait, because it's almost dinner time for you guys over there, right? It's 6.
Yeah,
right? 6:15.
essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait,
so
before we, sorry to pause. I forgot to ask, what city are you in?
I'm in like Austin area.
Okay.
And Ronnie, you're like just outside San Antonio.
San Antonio.
So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I knew you guys didn't live in the same town, but anyways,
No.
okay. Sorry, that helped my brain.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, you're fine. So we're going to go now into talking about the first ester, which is the mocktail. And the first ester, I love that. I love that I came up with like the first ester is such a great name for a cocktail. So the first
Is that
ester.
the actual name of the cocktail, or you tweaked that
No,
name
that's
also?
I mean, there is no mocktail version of this. I just
Okay.
I kind of have to craft mocktails on the fly every time for book club. So anyone who's real big on mocktails, give me feedback. I have gotten really big into mocktails lately. Like I'm definitely reaching for those. So I'm learning a lot. And what I will tell you about the first ester and about non-alcoholic rums in general, the one that we're going with is going to be, did I have it? I did have it. Hold on. It's going to be RK alcohol-free I can't talk. RK alcohol-free white rum. And the reason we're going with that one is specifically because it is good for mixing drinks. So just keep that in mind. There are some that are going to be good for sipping, but if you put them in a mocktail, they're going to disappear. And I came to find out that it's because if we're talking about mocktails and non-alcohol alternatives, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not going to be an exact substitute for your alcohol because water-based distillates don't behave the same way. So you just want to keep in mind that when you're experimenting with mocktails, and it is true mixology, play with things like fruits and botanicals and teas, things that infuse flavor and add flavor into your drink. And then also be careful that you're not over shaking or over stirring, because the difference between an alcohol drink and a non-alcohol drink, an alcohol drink needs that ice dilution. That's why you shake it up. That's why you stir it. But if you overdo that in a mocktail, you're just going to like flatten your drink. So do it with care. Be minimal when it comes to that, and play with flavors, because that's kind of where the mixology comes into play and gets really fun. You're creating a beverage that, you know, is elevated and elegant. So one thing that they recommend is like lavender bitters, non-alcoholic lavender bitters, or non-alcoholic orange bitters, things like that, that add flavor to your drink and, you know, craft it out better. So, but I will run you through real quick. I will run you through the first ester recipe just so you have that. Where did it go? Hang on. That's going to be the same. You're going to muddle your whole strawberries. You're going to do your RK, non-alcohol white rum. Then there's the 3/4 ounce of Lyre's, which is a really popular brand for non-alcoholic beverages. Their non-alcoholic orange sec, and then 3/4 ounce fresh lemon juice, not lime juice, lemon juice. And you shake that up, and you've got yourself, gently shake that up, and then you've got yourself a good, wonderful drink. So yeah, that's it. That's what I've got. I'm trying to think. I think I covered everything. I see you're drinking that. Ronnie, are you having anything or no?
I'm drinking a Celsius energy drink.
That's good. That's something.
I will say though, I forgot to say this in our last podcast. What was it called? The Christmas drink, mistletoe martini.
Mistletoe martini.
I did like that.
Okay.
It came out very good. You have to talk to Robert though, because he did not strain the ice out of it.
Oh, okay.
Wait. So did he make it for you again and remember the simple syrup the next time?
Yes.
Okay.
I did both ways. It was better with the simple syrup. The first time, yeah, Perla, he made it. He forgot to put the simple syrup in it.
And you're just like...
It was a little tart, but I still liked it.
Yeah. That's the one that had cranberries in it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's a that's a little hard.
Yeah.
No, I'm such a simple person that I will sometimes take the recipes and go to a bar like, can you make me this?
And they'll do it?
So, if I tip them high enough, yes.
I was gonna say, that's cool. That's a good idea.
I'm like, can you make me this? And then, slip a 10,
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. And then as always, guys, we've got a bunch of resources on this cocktail that we're going to link for you in our show notes. So that's it on that.
Thank you for putting mocktails. I know a lot of people are participating in Dry January, or their New Year's resolution is to, their relationship with alcohol, whether they want to just stop drinking because they don't want to. It's a good way to lose weight. I keep hearing that. I'm just a girl to that. But, if you don't drink and somebody questions you, just tell them it's none of their fucking business. I mean, whatever your relationship is with alcohol, either good, bad, or just in between, don't allow other people to shame you into not wanting to drink. Also, you're feeding into a very big industry. So shout out to all my mocktail people. Good for you.
Yeah. And like, as we said in our blog post about the drinks, like we're entering a golden era We're entering a golden era.
Could be.
And a golden era. But a golden era for mocktails and for all of these alternatives. So capitalize on that and explore and experiment. And this is, like I said, this is where mixology gets really fun, because you're just throwing stuff together. So
I don't know if you guys have like a big like tea circuit out in Texas, because maybe it's just because it's colder here, but there are a lot of like, and they're mainly made by Korean like first and second generation people, and they're like interesting like tea drinks, like it's like a chai, a take on a like kind of like these black tea, London fogs. There is a new place in Seattle called oh, it's so good. It's called Bonito. It's a new cafe that just opened here in Seattle, and they have a chai horchata. And I got to be really careful drinking that because it's $7, and I will just go just drink it in one shot. But it's really, I love those kind of like infusions of like taking what we have and then like adding something different, or cold brew café de la olla. Didn't think that would be really good. Delicious, sweet. Don't even need to add milk to it. It's so good.
Amazing. Yeah. So, okay. Well, we can get right into it then. We'll launch right into it. So, Before we go into it, does anybody need to do anything? Need to go to the bathroom? Need to do anything?
I need to adjust a pillow. So let me turn off my camera for a second.
Go for it.
You guys go ahead. And I'm gonna mute myself too in case my dog starts barking. That is Coco Chanel if she does make it to the episode.
What a
Coco
cool
Chanel, my
name.
Chihuahua. I'll send a photo of her. She's my guard dog. You get near our door, she's gonna bark. So we just and my thank you to my husband who
while you're fixing that, I'm gonna go ahead and so what we read, listeners, we read Extended Stay by Juan Martinez. It is a book that came out in 2023, and Ronnie has a little summary or synopsis to read for us.
All right. So, in a rundown neighborhood in the heart of Las Vegas, the Alicia, or I think we decided it was Alicia, the Alicia, because those white people, the Alicia Hotel awakens and beckons to the most vulnerable, those with something to hide. Haunting and visceral, Extended Stay uses the language of body horror and the Gothic to comment on the complicated relationship between the Latinx undocumented experience and capitalism, the erasure of those living and working on the margins, the heavy toll exacted by memory, and the queasy permeability of boundaries that separate the waking world from the world of dreams.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Perla, we're going to open with you. I want to, before we launch into like any specific thing or like, passages from it, I just want to capture your initial feelings on this read. You have read it twice now.
No, I'm going to reread it. So I've read it like 1.5 times, if that makes sense.
1.5 times. Okay.
Because I went back to reread passage part 2. I was like, I feel like I missed something, and I did.
So initial, what are your feelings coming off of this read and
so chapter 1, Mr. Juan Martinez. Dear God, did you just want to put blood on the pages? My God. I think we
need to all talk about our feelings about chapter 1.
So I was just like, all right, so this is and chapter 1 is always the world building. This is where you're gonna be, so this is where we're gonna go. I'm standing. So chapter 1, I was again same thing with Australia. I'm reading a book in public and I'm like, I need to not do this ever. Next time I get brought back, if I ever come back, I need to just read these in my room by myself and scream "what the fuck" really loud. But it really puts I felt a lot of sweat.
Yes.
In his I could feel my Apple Watch alerted me twice, your heart rate's going up. No,
are you okay? Are you having an event?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I did not do the audiobook, because I'm like, I can't do that. I can't go on a rage walk because I'm just gonna start running and kill myself in the process of running away from the book. Get away from me,
running away from the voices in my ear.
Yeah, exactly. Get them out of me. I'm gonna throw my Apple, my AirPods into the shadeless sheet because I walk around the perimeter of it. And I really was just like, wow, but it's also a really amazing brother-sister story. And that is the main focus of the story. It's about sacrifice. It's about love. It's about what are you willing to do for free rent? And also it's the plight of the undocumented. They are the sacrifice, and they really are the backbone of the hotel industry in Las Vegas. And in the kitchens as well. But it also shows the community in there, when they first are there and they're like, okay, this kid can't cook anything. And you're like, why are they being so nice to him? Oh, it's because they want to kill him. But it is a great, I really enjoyed this book. I definitely would have loved to have seen Lynch take a pass at this, or someone Lynch inspired. It's definitely in that realm, or Cronenberg or Clive Barker. A lot of body horror.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was really well done for being also an emotional story of survival and grace, and poor little Carmen and her sketchbook. I just, it also reminded me a lot of Diary by Chuck Palahniuk. Have you ever read that book?
No.
Oh man. So anyways, I'll tell you later. But that one, if anyone's read Diary, you know what I'm talking about. In that painting, this woman gets put in a room and blindfolded and told that her kid's been killed. So she has to paint.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And they're profiting off of her paintings. Like the word pain,
Mhm.
they would put paintings. And then the twist happens and you're like, good for you, girl. But it is really great. Like, I never heard of this book and I feel so bad, which again goes to the literacy is like, if it's a brown person on the cover, we're not. But thank you for selecting this book. But holy shit, chapter 1, I was like, I need to stop, because I'm, I participate in silent reading hour, and if you have one, I think I've shared with you guys, definitely participate, which is what recasted my love for reading again. I took a friend once and she brought a whole bunch of magazines with her and treated it as a plane. She's turned off her phone for an hour and she was able to enjoy it. But yeah, can I read my favorite line from
Of course,
chapter 1?
yes. From chapter 1? Okay.
From chapter 1.
Okay.
So we're on page 18.
Okay.
I've really learned that neither
Hold on,
he
I'm
nor
getting my book.
Carmen. Oh, okay.
No, you go ahead. But I'm getting my book.
Alvaro learned that neither he nor Carmen knew their extended family too well. Their grandfather was too old to care for them. Brother and sister spent the bulk of their days together. Him still shivering in their grandfather's squall row house in part of Barigua. He had not known the room was hot, and his sister still was not asking. What everyone knew about Carmen was that she was brilliant. She'd drawn anything you asked, and she was their dad's appetite for numbers and structures. She went to school and returned, and when he realized that he was revealed that he felt not having anyone giving him a hard time about dropping out. Carmen didn't care. His grandfather didn't quite know. And in the fog of their grief, it was too hard to tell how anyone else felt.
Mm-hmm.
And it really set that brother-sister relationship. Like Carmen, so an entire family gets slaughtered in front of him.
Yes.
I don't even want to bring up God, that fucking mom. Oh my God. And then it turned out to be mistaken identity, which that's the part where I was like, oh, so we're going to do that now, are
that's
we, Mr.
Where I put the book down and I looked at my husband who had read this before I did. And I was like, so it was the wrong people?
Yeah.
I was like, all pissed.
And then armless guy is like, do you remember me? No, of course he fucking doesn't. Everyone's like, who are you? Yeah. And I was just like, and then he starts hallucinating, they're coming for you. But was it Hotel Alicia coming?
Yeah.
Or Alicia coming for him? Because when those lines started to come back, I'm like, oh, please tell me this is not all linked to the hotel. You did not just slaughter that little girl so you could have your sacrifice. But it was the fog of grief is something that is encompassing, and until you're in it, you don't know where you are until someone's pulling you out. And I think Carmen did a good job of just not asking, not just drew her pain out. And then when he's like, we need to get out of here, and she's like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get out of here. Let's take the money that we got and we'll go to America. And, she didn't care. They forged documents. She was older. She didn't care. She just wanted it to be far, far away from where they were. And it's terrifying because it's still technically happening.
Yeah. I definitely want to talk about that. Ronnie, I also want to hear from you. What were your initial feelings coming off of this read? Did you just, because Perla, I had a text from her just shy of 1 a.m.
Should we,
I'm like, did you just
should we
finish
just
this
have
book?
a text chain? Yeah. Should we just have a text chain?
We should. So here's the thing. My husband read this, in fact, this is his book. That's why I think I recommended it, because we already had it in the house, and he read it last year. And so when he found out that we were going to read it for the podcast, he was like, oh, Vero, that it's pretty brutal. So I don't know how you're going to take to it. So I procrastinated reading it. I didn't even start this book till Sunday, and I finished it Wednesday. Because I just put off, and then I read the first chapter and I was like, oh God, I don't know if I can do this. And so opposite of you, Perla, I switched to the audiobook because I was like, okay, well, at least I can, if it gets rough like that again, I can just speed up and just whiz through the traumatic parts. So I procrastinated for the long time, and I wasn't in the headspace for something this heavy. In fact, as soon as I finished it, I went to the bookstore and I bought a middle grade book to read, to just kind of just for lighten
For self-care. Yeah.
for self-care.
And
Yes,
this is why I read my like hard case crime, little mystery, like smut novels, like hard detective smut novels, because there's always a murder, there's always some sex, there's the mystery, and then a twist, and then bye-bye book, you know. So
Yeah.
real quick, 100 pages, you know, sexy pulp novels, you know, just that's what I break in between books like this.
Yeah,
like,
so yeah, it was a trip, man. I mean, it was kind of The Shining with eldritch horror going on, body horror, grief, and just the trauma that we carry. No matter where we go, that's, we sit in it, we live with it.
that
I
night
almost,
that
hmm
I was gonna say
I
the
almost
night
feel
Godwin
like
paint
the night she paints
On
when
the
she
wall?
does the wall.
on the wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
And I
her.
almost feel like in that passage that you read, Perla, about how, Gadaman's not asking and he's not telling and they're not communicating. And like the social worker in me is like, but if they had ever like sat and talked about it, how might things have been different? Like, would they have both been chained up in their own separate, cells of grief? And how might that have affected their interactions with the hotel down the road?
Ooh, yeah. True.
But yeah, I just thought it was, and as horrible as the first chapter was, there was almost, with the writing style, it wasn't clinical, but it was just very utilitarian the way it was. It wasn't like super emotive. There was a detachment, at least for me, which I think makes sense.
Wait, are we in chapter 1? We're talking chapter 1?
Yeah, still chapter
Okay.
1. There was a detachment from the writing, and actually throughout the story, which makes sense because Alvaro's so traumatized.
Well, yeah, I feel
he has to keep that distance in order to not just completely lose it.
Well, yeah, I feel like what chapter 1 did so well, and it was only like in the moment when I was reading it, and I'll get to where I was in the car with my family when I was reading chapter 1.
No, that is
Just
worse.
in a car with my children in the backseat. But
and then you come to a complete pause, and you're like, if a girl and a gun comes, we're just gonna just chop her hand off. We'll chop her hand off.
We're just gonna run her down, and we're gonna
Tell
keep
her,
going.
yeah, exactly. Floor it.
Yeah, exactly. But give me that iPad. I'm gonna smack someone with it.
But yeah, I feel like what the writing does really well is just sort of like Alvaro, like I can just only imagine, but I'm like, you've got to leave your body a little bit when that kind of trauma is inflicted upon you. Like I imagine you have to like disassociate heavily just to
and
like.
I think that's why he starts hallucinating that person is like, oh, give them to me, to me. And I'm like, is that the angel of death? Is like, where are we?
You're just like not in your mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And just, and his little sister, like that's where I was just like, I just like looked out the window.
It was awful.
There's like every new horror with the descriptions of what's happening to the dad, and then the mother, and I was like, oh my God,
the mother
is he ever gonna stop? Like, how much worse can it get? And it would get worse.
Oh, and it gets worse. It's like, oh, so here, I'm gonna twist this knife in you, and you're like, oh, thank you, author Juan Martinez, señor. And then he's like, actually, you know what? I kind of like it over here. And you're like, oh, cool. You're underneath my lower. You're in my like Jesus like thing. And then you're like, okay, you've had enough. And then he's like, no, I'm gonna go right for your heart, right in the middle. And you're like, oh, thanks.
And I was like, good
yeah,
Lord.
It was, but also amazing first chapter, because that is what hooks people. And there
if you can make it through the first chapter,
right? I mean, I actually, yeah, it was.
Well, because it stirred up so much. Like I said, I was trapped in a car with my family when I was reading this chapter. And like I finished the chapter, I put the book down, and I was just like quiet. We were on our way to like a state park. We were taking the kids for like some day hiking. Like, so, I mean, I was just
so you're going to just walk in the forest with your family. So you just planned that one out real good, didn't you?
I mean, listen, so the irony is like, we're at the field later, like hiking, and my middle kid goes out of nowhere, just randomly goes, because we're in some tall grass. He's like, man, if I had a machete. And I was like, don't say machete to me right now. Like, I don't want to talk about
that kid. I would have taken the iPad away. I would have been like, no iPad for you. Like, what did I do? Like, I'll tell you later.
Please don't say that to me right now. but
yeah.
like,
oh my God. Yeah.
I was sitting there thinking about it. And I was trying to have a conversation with my spouse about it, and I couldn't articulate what I wanted to say, but it brought me to a question that I guess I kind of want to like pose to you guys as well to think about, because like what I was thinking about coming out of that chapter was like I was reflecting on that particular violence that they were experiencing, that particular time. And I was thinking about our own country, you know, and like what we're in. And I just was thinking about like, would you even be able to recognize when home was no longer home anymore, like no longer a safe space? And assuming that you could, would you have the strength to leave it? Because like my brain kept thinking about that. I think it was like a truck driver or somebody who was on the blockade with them, who kept kind of trying to reassure them, like, we're going to be fine. This happens all the time.
Before.
We're going to get through this and we'll
Even
be on
the
our
dad,
way.
when they were getting walked into the forest, was like touching them in the back and like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. We're going to get out of this.
Yes.
And he talks about how it annoyed him. And then it came back and he's like, oh, if I could have my dad do that to me right now.
Right.
Oh, don't worry, buddy. You get
comfort.
this. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you can condition yourself. Yeah, you can condition yourself to accepting a certain level of disruption, which is what they do. They're like conditioning themselves to accept the fact that these blockades are part of life and we're going to get through this and it'll be fine. So you can condition yourself to accept that. And I'm not trying to say that like the US is in any way on par with like anything that is going on in any other country in the world right now. But I don't think it's hyperbole to say that we have vulnerable and marginalized groups in our country who feel under threat and who don't feel safe and who are under attack. And so it's just like, I don't know what I'm trying to get at, but it really made me evaluate, like, could I recognize when home wasn't safe enough anymore for me to stay? And I don't know if you guys were grappling with any of that in reading the first chapter or not, but that's where my headspace was just like, what must that be like to like feel that and just sort of, and would I even be able to tell? Or am I just like, you know, that meme of that dog with the mug who's just like, in the room is on fire. And he's like, this is fine.
This is fine.
Everything's
Yeah,
fine.
this is fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Like, at what point do you say this is not fine?
Oh, this isn't fine. As someone who had to move and uproot her entire life to get away from her violent ex-husband and move away from my best friend, when you don't, so you know when you come home and you're like, oh, thank God I'm home. I can take off my bra. I can check my Instagram, or you know, like, you know, oh, I can. My house is air conditioned. You know, that feeling of like, when you come home and you feel anxiety, that's not home anymore. You need to get out. And my work made the conscious decision for me to move to Seattle. And again, I still think you guys picked on me for this book because of the people in Seattle. But it is, I mean, you might want to edit this part out, but I mean, you have Stephen Miller who's sitting there jerking off to the idea that he's going to round up the brown people and they're going to start ICE is going to go to Chicago, which they don't have any jurisdiction because it's the 100-mile radius from the border. Didn't realize 100 miles was from the border to Chicago, and they're going to start rounding out people because that's where Barack Obama lives. Like, and they're gonna, I mean, read up Operation Wetback in the 40s. They rounded up American citizens and put them in the middle of Mexico, and they fought and they won, and that's why there's a huge generation of kids that are no sabos because the parents decided, oh, you know what? We can't speak Spanish anymore. We can't do our customs anymore. We can't, you know, I grew up in the 80s and it was still taboo to speak Spanish and speak English at the same time. I'd go to school and they're like, oh, she speaks Spanish, so she's illiterate. Like, no, dumbass, I can speak in T language. I'm a little bit more smarter than you. Lots of, you know, visits to the principal's office with my parents, like, good job, but don't do that. So it is terrifying. Like, I don't feel like my country is my country anymore because a group of idiots, including Latinos, men and women, decided, oh, I'm gonna root for that guy, and now they've got leopards eat their face. Like, how's that going for you? How's the price of eggs? How much are eggs? You know, in Seattle they're about $7 for a dozen. How's that working out for you? Gas is still $4.50, and I remember during Black Lives Matter, the summer of 2020, there was a fire that was 10 miles from my front door. And I was told, you need to get ready to evacuate because the fire's coming. And I was like, okay, great. Then I hear word 2 miles to the fire line, people are trying to escape because they're evacuated. And these group of white men with AR-15s were pulling over any black family they saw because they thought they started the fire because the idiots heard BLM, meaning quarter of
Well, see,
BLM.
and so like
They heard the wrong thing. They heard the
Right.
wrong thing and they assumed like, oh, it has to be the black people. And what did the sheriff do? Just tell them, don't do that, and then let them go.
Yeah. Well,
So
yeah.
I mean, yeah, this part might need to be edited from the
Well, and like, but I mean, like, this is where I'm saying, like, I don't feel like it's hyperbole to say that. I mean, what is that? What is that if not like that's a? And maybe we will edit this part out. But it's like, that's a blockade. Like that's a blockade.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
That's
or the fact I think I mentioned to you guys earlier, or in my earlier episodes, or just exchanging messages with you guys. I spent summers in Laredo. And we would go to Laredo, or we would take the Laredo exit to get into Mexico. And then, a big family of brown people in a station wagon packed to the gills with shit. We would get pulled over and like, what school do you go to? And then we would talk to them like, oh, you're fine. Like, oh, so our American accents were so crystal clear that you let us go. But you technically, saw a bunch of brown, Mexicans, and we're like, oh, I gotta pull them over. This looks suspicious. Yeah, of course it looks suspicious. There's 7 of us in a station wagon with 6 seat belts. You know what I'm talking about,
Right?
And
yeah,
it's or when I love shopping at Nordstrom's. But every now and then I get that one security guard or the people that are overly helpful, and I'm like, so yeah, I have a Nordstrom credit card. I have Nordy bucks in the hundreds, not to brag, but that is where also Nordstrom is a local company. So I am helping my own economy. But yeah, it is the idea of being hunted. And when, somebody once did I work remotely, and I noticed the microaggressions ended. I didn't get the, oh, Perla's not friendly enough. Like, no, I just don't want to do your job. I do my job, you do yours. So it is that idea that your safe haven, like you said, Valerie, is when you're safe and that gets taken away, what do? Can you uplift? Can you remove yourself from the situation? Some people can't. And then there's the every election cycle, they're like, oh, the migrants are coming. And then you're hearing their stories that they have very similar to what happened in chapter 1, where they're escaping the pain, they're escaping the violence, and they will walk miles and miles and miles to come to the United States, and they will scrub toilets. They don't care. They just want to be away and create the American dream and start from the bottom and go to the top, become homeowners, have their children be college graduates, whatever the dream is. It's some people just want to eat McDonald's. Hey, good for you. But then you have a group of people like, oh, they're not good enough. Like, well, half of Americans couldn't even pass an American citizen test if you asked them. And also my stepmother, God bless her, I love her to death, when she speaks with an accent. And one time somebody accused her of being, not having an accent. She's like, right, I speak 2 languages. You can barely grasp English. What's your excuse?
Yeah.
I always say like America is like Rocky in the third Rocky movie, where he's just coasting. He's not really being tested against like the real good prize fighter. So he's kind of, and to me that's America. Like we think, the propaganda is, greatest country in the world, blah, 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 when we rank like really low on so many metrics.
Oh my God,
compared to other countries. And we're Rocky at the beginning of Rocky 3. It's just
or how like they don't want to, like, anyone who's been displaced by the fires and are listening to us, I hope you're safe somewhere and you're getting the aid that you need. It's from Seattle. We're doing a lot of benefits. I know that we are the nation is with you, because clearly the government is, and they're like, oh, we need to change the rules to California. California by itself, if it became its own country, is the 5th highest economy in the world, and it gives more to this government than they take from the government. So maybe we should backtrack that. But anyway, sorry. Lots of edits.
We could get into a whole different podcast.
Oh, I know, exactly. We're like, so this welcome to the podcast. It's called Don't Listen. Where we talk about mid Texan and I love Texas because this is why I love Texas, is because Texas was its own country at one point, and then America was like, join us. And there are some Texans that still take that personal.
Yeah.
When I learned that, when I met that person that I was like, Texas was their own country, I'm like, you don't say, but yet you're still a state of the United States. Like, yeah, I regret that decision. Like, you act like they asked you personally.
Okay. On the topic though of like what you guys were mentioning there about like sort of the immigrant experience and how that kind of definitely ties into this book. There were, I don't know, I'm jumping around a little bit, but there were key moments in the book where I felt like that's really highlighted, where Alvaro is like being able to move through spaces and he's, invisible. But I feel like the book also just sort of really highlights some of the other societal ills, like consumerism. I mean, in a city in like Vegas in particular, right? Like just consumerism, greed, all of those things, the ways in which we sacrifice and exploit workforces, in particular, immigrant workforces. And so I don't know if you guys had anything you wanted to share there or say about that, or like passages that really stood out to you that typify that.
So also Ellie is, also the front of the house to the back of the house. We have Ellie and Winfred, who are white women who have.
Sorry.
No. I mean, Coco Chanel is we're just.
I love that name.
Coco Chanel.
Chanel.
She has white gloves. That's why I gave her that name. The front of the house, the back of the house experience. Like, I don't know if you guys are BBC fans, but Upstairs, Downstairs, that was the big hit before Downton Abbey. That's another class dynamic.
We know Downton Abbey, but not big
Upstairs, Downstairs. That was the OG. Yeah, good. It's been remade. Which is probably why I didn't get into Downton Abbey right away, because I'm like, it's just Upstairs, Downstairs, not realizing. But it is. So I was just recently in Las Vegas in October, as I mentioned, and there is the class dynamic of the person that took my order spoke perfect English, but the person that was assisting me getting my food, being the bus person, spoke with an accent, which clearly meant, and it wasn't just Latinos. Like, I met Jamaicans, I met people from the islands, and these people work on tips. So I found out real quick, like, oh wait, this is Cash City. I gotta get cash. And I stayed in Fremont. I think I showed you the photo where I'm like, that's the Ogden from my front door of my hotel. The Ogden, which means the hotel I stayed in, is the Alicia Hotel. I even read the passage where they described where the hotel was, and I'm like, so it's the Cortez, the Ogden, and then kitty corner is the Alicia. And my husband was like, wait, that's the Oasis. I'm like, yeah, creepy. I'm really glad I stayed there before I read this book. And it is definitely the invisible people, the people that are picking up vomit, because I mean that I sent you another like desolate kind of casino, and we just went in there because they had really nice air conditioning, and that's the only reason why we walked into that one casino.
But it did, like desolate is the word. It just looked creepy as crap.
It did, and yeah, it was kind of scary. We stayed for like 30 minutes. We cooled down. We bought a water, and then we walked out. And Fremont is where it's called like where the locals go, because I didn't want to go to the strip, the overconsumerism, and I just didn't want to get near it. And I was like, no, I want to stay in old Vegas. Also, it's the era of the 60s, like you said, Valerie. It's when they built it. This is the original strip. And I've watched way too many noir movies, and the James Bond Diamonds Are Forever was filmed on the Fremont Strip, and they recently remodeled it, the Plaza Hotel. So I was just like, well, I want to be near like what I'm used to seeing. And yeah, it's beautiful, and those lights are real fucking bright at 2 a.m, 24-hour drinking. But there is this, I don't know how to describe it, because I didn't know what space I was in. I wanted to talk to the people that were assisting me, the staff members, and the restaurants I ended up with were the ones where like the bartender I'd met from the other bar went there to have his late night dinner. So I was definitely like in that realm, and they just want to eat their food and go home, and they're friendly. And then there's the rude people that are like, I'm from X state, and just rude. And I'm like, did you just wake up to be why would you be mean to these people? They're helping you, and you want to be rude to them. And it's like that scene where the mushrooms are rotten and Dan's like, oh no, we need to serve that to people. And I'm like, and legal brain me went, oh, so you want a lawsuit and then you're going to blame it on the employees, because that's what always happens. You always blame the employee, not not, oh, we just wanted to save a dime and we serve rotten mushrooms in our omelets.
Okay, hang on a second, guys, because I just got a mess. I locked my family out of the house, so I'm going to turn off my camera for a second and go deal with that. You guys carry on.
We'll pause.
Yeah,
we'll do a timer. Market production team.
You can also just keep the conversation. Like, Ronnie, if there was something that you wanted to say in reference to like the immigrant experience as it's portrayed in this story, feel free, go for it. I'll be right back. I'm sorry. How do I turn off my video? Hang on. I'm going to figure this out.
The camera on the bottom.
Okay, here we go. All right. I'll be right back.
All right. Okay.
It doesn't have a camera on the bottom.
So there's like mark clip, mic, camera, speaker, share, and then leave right at the bottom. Yeah.
All right. I thought that would like block out everybody. Okay. Well, good to know. I'm not the most tech savvy person, so
neither am I. I had a little. I took a YouTube on how to do this because I was like, Riverside, what is this? I know Zoom. I only know Zoom.
Right.
So, yeah. But I love that you guys are from Tejas, by the way. I mean, like I said, Tejas is magical to me just because it has that history that it was its own country, and that to me, I was like,
yeah, what? I think it's. I don't know. The political climate down here is.
Oh, I understand. I mean,
yeah. I wish things were.
She's back.
Okay,
that was quick.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like right outside the door. Evidently, I locked every door to the house, and he's like, "So we're just sitting in the car." I was like, "Okay, sorry."
You're like, just wait for the girl with the gun in the window.
But I did think it was like with what we. Well, first of all, still in chapter 1, I thought that it was really interesting that this horror novel, which if you'd read like the blurb or whatever, you kind of get a sense that it's like most horror, there's going to be some kind of supernatural, otherworldly element to it. But it started off with very human manufactured horror with the whole what happens to his family. And then we segue, they make their way to Vegas and he gets the job at the Alicia, and you really quickly start to realize that there's, stuff going on under the surface, and that these people, these, Alvaro, Marisol, her boyfriend, what's his name? Humberto,
yeah.
All these people, like they're literally in this world, in this book, literally like fodder for the machine. They're there just for their usefulness to the hotel, to the people that own the hotel, to capitalism, and they're just kind of like literally being consumed.
Yeah.
The Plum Blazers, and then what was it, like Seattle, and then Kara was the machine. It was like the part that I was like, oh wait, Kara's just a group of people. It's a syndicate. It's not a. I was kind of like ripped off, and I was like, oh, god dang it.
I wanted to read this passage. I have a lot of passages.
I saw your Instagram live, and I'm like, oh, we're on video. Oh, okay. And then I saw the tabs, and I'm like, oh, she came. She is ready.
Well, there's like, ultimately, and we'll get to the ending, but the writing is so beautiful, and particularly towards the end, I cried. And then I reread the ending today because I was preparing my notes, and I cried again. So it's just like there's just a lot of crying moments in this book. But like in reference to what we were talking about earlier, which in this case, I think it kind of highlights the immigrant experience a little bit, but also in a roundabout way, it also highlights what I was talking about with chapter 1, and kind of what chapter 1 made me reflect on is just like, would you even be able to recognize when you are living in a nightmare that you need to, leave, or essentially, quote unquote, wake yourself up from the nightmare? So in this passage, this is, I don't know what the chapter is. Oh, chapter 25, page 254. It's Alvaro talking, or Alvaro. this is about him. He says, it says, he had gone away. He had gone anyway and lied to himself. That was always the great comfort, the easiest lie to believe, that they'd be fine, that things wouldn't get worse, that Carmen at least would be fine, she'd be safe even if he wasn't, that the only person he was putting at risk was himself, that he could leave her and she'd be fine, that they needed to wait anyway, that he needed to convince her to wait because payday was only a few days away. That was the awful thing. They missed the moment where they could have slipped away. And now his sister was trapped. Him too. He'd be trapped if he tried to go after her. So just like that lie that we all tell ourselves, that it's like, it's fine. It's fine. This is fine. This is fine. You know, like it's not going to get worse. It's in my head. Like it's okay. We just need to get to XYZ. If I can just get to the next payday, if I can just get to the next paycheck, you know, like something will shift
and then
in
it
our
becomes
favor.
too late.
And it becomes too late. So I thought that like there's just lots of passages in the book that I feel kind of touch on that experience because, and I say this because like in our resources that we are including for listeners and show notes, there are interviews with the author. This book definitely does touch on the immigrant experience, I think. And yet I don't feel like any of the interviews I read or listened to really allowed him, the author, to go there. And so I'd be interested, and we're not an interview format podcast, but I'd be interested to hear him speak on that experience as it pertains to this book, because I feel like there's stuff that I took away from the writing that reflects on that. But I don't feel like I encountered any resources that talk about that really dive into that. And I'd be interested in diving into that. Did you guys come across any passages that for you stood out in that way?
I'm trying to find it. It's the one on people burying their grief. And it was after Dan had been injured. And he was like, oh, I guess people, because then he came back and business was normal. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody talked about it. And I even read it out loud to my husband. And it was like, oh, maybe sometimes just people continue working to ignore their grief. And
yeah,
man,
and those are the things. Those are the things that stood out more to me. And again, you know, as readers, as consumers of whatever media, we bring our own stuff into it and what we pull out of it. And so, being that I'm a social worker, the things that stood out to me that I focused or honed in on more was not really the immigration experience. It was more the grief and the trauma and the processing of trauma. And because even from the beginning, it seemed to me that from the start, Alvaro was suffering some level of depression.
And post-traumatic stress. I mean,
yeah, well, even before that, when he was just talking about like he kept quitting college, he just didn't lack motivation. He would cry for no reason.
Right.
So he was already suffering from that. And then you compound what happened with his family. So then you have the post-traumatic stress from that. But also something that is a lot less known and talked about outside of the mental health field is moral injury. And I think for sure he's suffering from moral injury.
Speak on that more.
Moral injury is, and you know, I work for the VA, so my personal experience has been with soldiers, veterans, and this comes across a lot with them. Moral injury is when you are forced to do something that goes against your own moral compass. So like soldiers who are forced to kill in combat or that sort of thing. And obviously, you know, he had to shoot his sister.
Yes.
So he's definitely going to feel a sense of moral injury because that contradicts who he is, his own personal moral sensibilities, his moral, you know, his knowledge of right and wrong. And so he's dealing with that. And so he's carrying all that. So those are the things that really stuck out more to me than, you know, the immigration stuff, which obviously was there also, but I was just kind of more honing into those things that Alvaro was, and the whole fact that Alvaro isn't even his name. He took the name, the fake name of the person that his father was accidentally murdered in place of. So it's kind of like almost wearing a scarlet letter, you know, over his own sense of guilt, his own sense of survivor's guilt, of shame at what he did. So to me, that was all what I was like really focusing. And I was like, we never even find out his real name, right? In the
No,
whole
we
Yeah,
don't.
the closest
point
we
of the
get is
book.
they start calling him El Galan in the
Yeah.
kitchen. And then he said, "Oh, I almost said my name is close to that." And then you're
Yeah.
like,
So the whole
and
book, he doesn't have his own identity,
Yeah.
which is a whole other thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
it definitely had once they get into Las Vegas, and this is maybe because I'm in January Giallo, or the heavy Giallos come in, and Giallos are the Italian mystery where it's like, David Lynch would be like Blue Velvet. It's someone from out of town who finds something, who sees something, and then has to figure out what happened. And he's in Las Vegas, and he's just noticing these odd things happening, and then he gets plucked by the Plum Blazers or by B, because he's like, "Oh, I turned on a faucet on floor 3 and roaches came coming out." And he's like, B goes, "Oh, I couldn't recognize you because of your heavy accent. That was you?" I'm like,
Yeah.
like, so we're going to just bypass that the roaches are coming out of the faucet.
Right.
And
Can you focus on the
yeah, and then we find out why they're doing that. But another passage I thought was really good.
Did you find the one that you were looking for? The one?
No, but I found the other one, which I really like, which was 78.
Okay.
And this is after he'd been in floor 3 and met the index cards.
Okay.
And then he's like, "Wait till she hears about what just happened." And I love that the italics was him talking to himself. Like his inner, his id and his psyche was, and he's talking about Carmen. "Wait till she hears about the room with the index cards. Wait till she hears about Ellie and Clarabelle. We chased a dog and she's here with us, and she's here in the hotel and hiding. Just wait." The slot machines chirped their shirt song. They chirped it again. Someone yelled, and it was kind of a short and happy yell that everyone working the casino grew accustomed to. A big win, followed by a big loss. A crowd echoed the yell, applauded, and the world below and the world of gamblers, cropers, continued in its business, and in doing so insisted in perpetual lie. Nothing of consequence happened, and nothing of consequence could happen. Everything was fine. That's why I pulled it, because everything was fine.
Everything was fine.
The big lie.
And that kind of goes to like, and at a certain point, I do want to get into just like basic plot questions or plot thoughts that you guys may or may not have. But like, I kind of got into this framework, especially by the end, when I was really starting to pay really close attention to, or maybe it wasn't that I was paying close attention. Maybe it was just that things were jumping out at me more. The parallels of the American quote unquote dream that we sell people and what is reality, because like I started to sort of see the face beneath the face kind of became a
that was a great
stand-in.
line. And if you ever seen Eyes Without a Face, it hit that note hard. It was the face within the face, which is like, the fakeness that you put out to the world. Like, at work we have to,
America is this beacon on a hill, but
and so
that's
that's
when you go,
the underbelly, the dark underbelly is.
Yeah, I mean, like that, like the face beneath the face really stood in for me as like what the U.S. kind of represents. And so like there's passages that just sort of started to really stick out at me once I made that note for myself. Like this one on page 265, the face had no easy analog, immense and writhing, a mass of appendages from which other tentacles unspooled, beyond which Alvaro spotted stars and nebulae, kept in place by wet black coils. Bigger than us, bigger than anything, bigger than our world, bigger and indifferent. You could fall. You could be swallowed. Think about this in terms of like the American experience, guys. You could fall. You could be swallowed. You could so easily slip in, and the system that kept the coils slithering over each other would barely register your presence, your sacrifice. Like, it just started to make me kind of consider the fact that like the American dream, and as far as it is sold to us and to the people who come here in search of it, is no dream at all. It is this nightmare that sucks you in. It is this nightmare that especially in the way that we, like I said, exploit and sacrifice vulnerable workforces. It's no dream at all.
Have you guys ever seen An Evening in Soho? Oh, okay. Watch it on. It's by the same guy that did like Hot Fuzz and the Sean.
I do know those movies.
Yeah. So this girl is like obsessed with the 60s, just wants to live in the 60s, but she's in modern time. And she like somehow starts like mind jumping into Last Night in Soho. She starts mind jumping to the 60s in this way. She like plays a record and then like she ends up there as another woman. But then she realizes that it is, to be a singer in London, you can sing, but you're also a sex worker, and you're following your dream, and that's what she sees in the magazines. But these women are getting exploited, and it's the idea of like, yes, but the dream is rotten. And another one to talk about the slot machines. This is on chapter 26, and this is
what page?
Page 257.
Okay,
which is where you just were, I think, right?
Okay, yeah, close. Yeah.
So they emerge into the darkness in the garnish of yellow pit. Clarabelle keeps herself quiet. By the way, thank you for returning, Clarabelle. I was like so nervous for Clarabelle.
I was like, if you hurt this dog, I'm out.
I'm like, yeah, I was like, you already murdered a 5-year-old. How dare you, Mr. Senor Martinez?
The way he kept alluding to her bloody muzzle is like, I swear to God, I'm out. If you,
I'm like, you killed the dog, I'm burning the book. That's it. That's one step too far. And especially after we're dog mothers as well. Alvaro followed suit, and through the pit seemed empty, and as the rest of Fremont. The machines were on, but unattended. Row after row, sullen in shadows. Stacked on the chips sat on the game tables. So did ashtrays and drinks, and a barrif of pink teddy bears. Someone's lucky charm, he supposed. He walked towards the cafe. Alvaro crouched and kept low to the ground. The backs of the machines were smeared with blood. There were the walls and the floral paper. He could make out handprints and the streaks. He could make out what he assumed was a visceria. The globs of something dark, rich on the walls. The globs reflected the heavy glow of the overhead light. The odd insects worked at cleaning, at eating the soft and pink red bits. But a great number more coursed through the translucent flesh of the structure. He blinked and lost track of the bugs. The walls were walls, and he blinked, and the walls turned into something else, solid then not. The Alicia can see us, he thought. She knows we're here. She's waiting. And just the idea of like blood all over the place, like that's where I was like, oh, so this is a David Cronenberg book now. Now we're there. It just that's why I sent you that picture where I was like, hey, check out this photo I sent you of the empty casino, because it was empty, and they're chirping and they make a lot of noise, and I'm just like, I just want the little thing that goes to 3 and just give me the jackpot so I can get my money. That's what I was looking for. I don't need something flashing at me. There was one casino that was so bright I had to actually put on my prescription sunglasses because I could not see. It just burned. And it is the American dream where I was also the driver when I was in Las Vegas. So I stayed sober predominantly in my vacation in Las Vegas, which I'm really glad I did, because it kept me very tuned into myself, because I know if I started gambling, I'd be like, oh, we can just blow rent. That's fine. We'll win it back, because that's the dream. You're like, oh, if I put in, it'll feed me back. And you're like, no, you're just feeding the machine. They're not. The algorithm, the monster. If you ever watch From Beyond, that's another great, H.P. Lovecraft based movie. They had to feed it so it would leave them alone, and then when they don't feed it, all hell breaks loose. And it's really just those final chapters. I was just like, oh my God, please just let them be happy together. I want them. And it's
well, there's that whole motif through, talking about the underbelly of the American dream. There was also, and it was repeated several times throughout the book, about how they're all infected. They're all infected, with this American dream. And there's this passage that I liked. I always like to pick out passages that when I write my review, I always like to highlight a specific passage that's not too spoilery for people who don't want spoilers, but it says, here is what he knew, what he learned. The more he tried to resist, the more he tried to leave, the more he hungered to stay, the greater the force that kept him in the Elysia, save none. which kind of circles back to what you said, Valerie, your thoughts about how do you know when home isn't home, and when the realization comes to leave, is it too late because you were waiting for that next paycheck or that next perfect time or the stars to align for you to get out. But it's still the things that are pulling you to stay planted where you are instead of making your escape. And that phrase that I forget who said it or where it was said, is the drawback to listening to an audiobook is that if I don't have the book with me to immediately mark the spot, I don't remember where it was, but what was it? Serve all, save none. Which could be read different ways, right? Because when you say serve all, service is like something that you're giving out to other people, right? But in this hotel, it could also be serve food. So we're going to serve all to the Alicia's food, saving none. Like what was your ladies' thoughts on that? Serve all, save none.
Serve all, save none. I mean, if you were to take it to honestly, when you say that to me, if you were to take it to the broader context of the the capitalist, talking about societal ills, the capitalist mindset of, how not just Vegas, but how many cities operate. It makes me think of take a look at our own state, us in Texas. At the height of COVID, we never had lockdown here in Texas. We just had stay at home because, our state leaders chose to do that. But we had our lieutenant governor of the state of Texas kind of advocating in interviews on television, we don't need to protect our grandparents. Our grandparents are essentially, they're ready to die for the state economy. It's that kind of mentality that serve all. It's for the greater good. If you sacrifice yourself, save none, that's what that evokes for me. It's just this, again, it's going back to sacrifice everything for not even your piece of the American dream, because there is no dream, but it's the piece of the lie that we want to keep selling of what this is. I don't know. Perla, do you have something? You look like you're
so it was actually the neck tattoo from the men from Seattle, which I was like, so are these guys prison people? Because I'm from that era that, we didn't do face tattoos or neck tattoos, which I'm really glad society has moved as a whole, because we have someone like Post Malone and, very popular to have the little, Marilyn here.
Yeah.
So it's the man could not stop scratching. And this is on the beginning of chapter 19, page 167. Alvaro followed whirls as they dipped in and out of views, and they resolved into a readable phrase: serve all, save none. The men were too pale from Vegas, his skin clammy, freckled, and doughy. Press your finger against it, and its indentations would stay in place. The other men in the group were also built for the Pacific Northwest, strangers to the heat and the sun of Nevada, uncomfortable in the recycled air of the yellow pit. They wore too much fleece. They checked their smartphones, they frowned, and they scratched at their skin. They all had the same neck tattoo.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, so I'll get out of my fleece and put on my Noche Buena sweater for y'all. It is also have you ever worked in a restaurant? Have either of you worked in a restaurant?
I haven't. So, I've done college. She's done. I've done retail. Retail was my.
Okay, I've done both. I've done
both
and
too,
it is. Yeah. So retail is detail, right? Remember that. And then the other at the restaurant was don't waste any food until it gets returned. That's when you throw out the food. But I remember when, customers would send food back and they would be like, well, this is bad. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to do for it? They're going to do something to your food.
I always tell my family, don't piss off your food service workers.
I'll send a drink back. Yeah, exactly. And this is when in the time where I could get a job at any restaurant place, because I'm I speak Spanish. Great, you can talk to the kitchen. So I'd be the hostess. And you really, I still think about this woman who would order salads without any lettuce.
What? Wait, what?
So just
she tomatoes would order the meat and stuff?
Yeah, it was
tomatoes.
I think it was
cucumbers.
She never looked healthy too. So I don't know if it was a dietary issue or something, but she would order a salad without without lettuce, and I was just like,
all right,
yeah. Or there is like an over consumerism. Like I look at the, like, how should I describe it without like outing myself? So I wear very high end makeup because I want to, not because someone told me to.
No.
The makeup I wear is rarely on in like advertisement, or like influencers don't have it because it is a very high price point. Like the lipstick I wore at my wedding was $100. And the reason why is because I like how the makeup is made. I like how that the way the foundation, I like the way that is because it's on your face. And my mother, we had no money, but we always had money for Montgomery Ward, Estee Lauder makeup. But, that kind of idea is where I got that. And it's like, because it's on my face. And she would go only twice a year, during gift with purchase. But why is that ingrained in my brain? Like, what consumerism did I read? It's not in a commercial. Is it just something that is inherited in me, which I do think? And yes, my mother did haunt me the week of my wedding. We'll talk about that later. But the men from Seattle, like, he was the one that said we're all infected. Because remember, he also like took a piece of the hotel and fed it to Dan, and he was able to rejuvenate himself.
Yeah.
And then we met Clarabelle, or not Clarabelle. What was the mother's name? When we find Marisol,
was it Charlene?
Like,
Charlene?
Yes,
Charlene.
Yeah, when we meet Charlene, and then she's humming the Three's Company theme song, which I was like,
well, so what did you guys think of that? The Marisol chapter?
The Nightmare Room.
That felt very that felt very Hellraiser to me.
No, thank you.
Yeah, Hellraiser, exactly. That was where I was like, oh, so we're in Clive Barker territory.
Yeah,
it is.
I was like,
the fact.
Sorry, wrong room. Back out.
I was like, oh, pardon. No, that I regretted eating breakfast and then reading that passage because I was like, I gotta keep reading. It was, or the fact that they lied and someone mimicked her voice, and that's why he didn't want to pick up the phone to tell Carmen, and even then she's not able to. Alvaro can't tell Carmen, like, I'm on my way out, I'm on my way home, because she can't understand him because it's trying to learn his voice. And she was like, oh, she got sick and then she went to CVS, but she's fine. And then Humberto is also getting cloned and being rejuvenated, but the real Humberto was like, where the hell is Marisol? Why is she not here? And then we find out what happened to the real Marisol, because he bartered. He did what was happening to his, the people of the employees of the hotel, which was, I'll give you B, but you need to give me Marisol. And they're like, yeah, we'll take her to Marisol. And she was.
Well, you know what was so interesting is, like, because it makes me wonder, like, how that giving up of Marisol took place. Because, like, when Alvaro makes the realization that he's given up Carmen, it's such a subtle thing that you don't pick up on until it's highlighted later in the book, when he realizes, oh my God, it was when I gave Winifred the backpack. That's when I gave her up. And I didn't, he didn't know.
He didn't
and we
knowingly
didn't know.
give her up.
Right. Like, he didn't knowingly give her up. And it kind of makes me wonder, it's like, did Humberto give her up? Or was it like, it's so.
I think he was sold a bill of goods and told this is for the better, because that's why,
because he even says they don't explain it to you. It's like it would be like the little teeny tiny print in a contract. Like, you think you're
the area of law I work in.
Yeah, you think you're agreeing to one thing, but in reality, the fine print, it's something totally different.
Yeah, anytime you read a contract, always read the liabilities and who just, this isn't legal advice. It's just the way of life.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the industry I live in. But yeah, it was the terms and conditions of the exchange was like, oh, so I'm going to give you this backpack, and that way we can have Carmen safe, and her things are here, darling. And Winifred was also working that, always smoking, like pulling out the cigarette to have him light it, and the plum jacket. And I honestly think after she saw Dan get eviscerated not once but twice, she made her deal with the devil, because they're like, well, why do you do this? And it's like, oh, long life and all these. So I'm like, oh, so you're creating vampires essentially, and that's why they live in Seattle, because there's no sunlight. But Yeah,
Makes
it's true. I
sense.
mean, there's
Makes
a reason
sense.
why I'm about 4 shades lighter than my dad. I mean, there is a high. My friend that was just here for my wedding was like, I remember you used to have really dark skin. What happened? Like, I live in the Pacific
You're
Northwest.
like, I never see the sun.
No, I don't.
Here's a question. Or finish your
yes.
thought, Perla.
And I was just gonna say, like, I think Winifred was just gaming, and there was the other thing in this book was there was no loyalty behind the brother and the sister. Between them, they had loyalty, but everybody else was fair game, which is why I thought it was like an Italian giallo. Was like they would kill their own coworker to save their own ass.
Yeah.
My question, and maybe I missed something listening to the audiobook, so for you ladies that read it with your own eyeballs, why did it seem, or it seemed to me, that Ellie never seemed to be affected, or at least seemed blissfully unaware that all this stuff was happening, that Alvaro seemed to pick up on, pretty quickly after starting working there. Why was it that Ellie seemed like apart from that?
Like not corrupted by it, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, that's interesting because like you get the vibe that she is certainly a more central character than like Umberto, for instance. Yeah, but it doesn't seem like she was corrupted by.
Like she seemed totally oblivious that anything weird.
Even though she ultimately does get given up to, or whatever, she gets like pulled. She gets pulled into the walls of the Alicia as well. I'm not really sure.
I think because she could be traced back, so they could pick off these, like, so when they were like when they start feeding the hotel, they are hunting the undocumented workers, the ones that they knew, like, oh, if we take them away, no one's going to come looking for them.
Maybe
Ellie's
that's what
established.
it is, yeah.
She says she has family. She lived. She grew up in Las Vegas, so she has a history. And this goes. I mean, this is just. I just finished reading the John Wayne Gacy book, and the only reason why he got caught was because he killed a rich kid, and the parents went and freaked out, and that's how he got caught. He killed a rich kid, and he had over 20 victims buried in his house.
So maybe that's what it is then. It's just like the rest of these people are all marginalized. Although like Ellie, I got the impression is also an immigrant as well, but it's like you said, she's established, she's a white immigrant family, she's a white immigrant. And so she's not as easily disappeared as the rest of them are. That's a good point. I do like, did you have, we can get to like little
Lost
questions
and Found.
too.
Can we talk about them? Because holy shit.
Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Baby Huey. Ludo and I don't know. The scene with all the different like stacked bodies in the penthouse and all the broken heads. I was just like, yeah, this is bad. Like, why are you doing this to me? Or the fact that he like picked up the body and the head never moved, meaning that they had broken all the heads off like dolls.
Right.
And then, the idea of like ice always looming, but like Lost and Found. It took me a while to realize that the twins in Lost and Found were the same people, because they were, they were the security, they were the muscle, but they were also like, they were fighting for their lives too. But what was up with all the different incarnations of Esther and
all
just
the Esthers, all of the, like, I got the sense when we talk about Jacob, like I can't remember the exact passage, but you get the notion, you get the idea that there have been multiple Jacobs. And so that was sort of like,
or is it just the same Jacob, like reincarnated, for lack of a better word, or cloned, or whatever you want to say, that just they were at some point in time. And there is actually, that I found kind of late last night, a short story. It's called Esther, that Juan Martinez wrote the year before this book was actually published. And so it's very short. Like, I wouldn't even know if I call it a short story. It's like just paragraphs long. But it has Jacob, and it's set in 1855. So it seems like they're Mormons to me, like, more, because I think they even references. I read this at like 2 a.m. So it's a little fuzzy in my brain. But it references
poor like reading time.
It references the
best,
followers.
That's the best time to read.
it references the followers of is it John Smith, the head of the
Mormon,
John Smith,
Jesus of Christ of Latter-day Saints or whatever,
traveling in their wagons and
bring
in
them young.
in the short story, like all the women and the children are already dead. It's just the men left, and they're trying to vanquish this entity, whatever. So so I don't know if Jacob, who is referenced in that short story, if they were just, consumed by the entity, whatever the face beneath the face is, and they've just kind of been trapped there all this time, and they just take form, or the Alicia gives them form as needed to, I don't know. It's very weird. I have a lot of questions that were not answered for me.
Perla, I don't know if
we should do a special episode with Senor Author Juan Martinez, and I'll interview him. I do a lot of author interviewing now, but I almost feel like, or he'll hold a David Lynch, like, oh, can you elaborate on that? No,
no.
I kind of felt like, especially when I think it was Jacob that said, like, oh, we're consumed. We come, the reason why we do this for longevity, for long life, for riches. And it is essentially like, the American consumerism and the dream of to being alive and being able to see centuries and centuries. But at what cost? I mean, their gray skin, like the fact that he said the indentation, they are just they're also kind of the way Alvaro described them was they're miserable. They didn't like what they were doing, but they did it. And then the fact that they lost control of the hotel, quote unquote, they lost control of the mother. But was it because they lost the control on the exchange of that relationship? Because she was like, you know what, you don't control me. I'm going to do my own thing, which is slaughter the entire town of Las Vegas. Or, the fact that the hotel was growing and building itself.
Yes.
Like when we lose
like a living organism that they're inside.
Yeah. Did you ever watch Cronenberg's film about like the people infected in this building?
No. Well, what was the name of it?
Let me look it up.
Okay. No, like I didn't know what to make of. There's just a lot of things that aren't answered there. So like, the
photographs where and even Alvaro's in those photographs.
Yes.
And
that felt very The Shining to me, of just like, you've always been here. That kind of vibe of like, yeah.
But then I'm like, but I want them to get out. Like, I don't, and does Alvaro get out? He doesn't physically get out because he ultimately
so I definitely
sacrifices himself.
Right. And so, it's like he sacrifices himself.
So is this gonna
but then you don't know, like, what do Carmen and Esther go to? Like, what is their future? What is this? Like, are they, because it's like I forget if it's Winifred or somebody who's like, we're not human.
We're not people.
Like, we're not people. It's somewhere. I wrote it on my
B, the
because
owner.
I don't know who says this. This is the line, but I wrote it down. Because we were never people, we were fodder. Which is also another great,
that could just be
great expression of the immigrant experience,
people.
right?
We're just fodder for the machine, right?
How we're perceived.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not people.
We
fodder.
just feed it. Yeah, it's called Shivers, by the way. It's a the Cronenberg film I was referencing. A lot of body horror in that one too. Except the weird thing is when they get infected by the worm thing, they all get horny. So it's really crazy to see like this like roving orgy running around this building. It's crazy, but it's not like a raging orgy. It's just you see a group of horny people just like going nuts.
But like the
well, and B also mentions how this is cyclical, right? With the Alicia, like she wakes up every however many years, and so like is Alvaro just going to be trapped in this cycle that it's
or Dan too? Dan talks like Dan tries to get involved in that pro-life protest. And he like changed. He wore a captain hat, and aviator glasses, and a bed. But Alvaro spots him, and he's like, "Hey, you can't leave. You got to come back." And Dan refuses to go back inside. And it's or when they go back to their extent, they're like, "We got to get out of here." And then they got to they go to the extent of saying someone's broken into it and made it a drug den and there's glass everywhere. And he's like, well, I got to go back to the hotel. And Carmen's like, dude, don't go back. Like, don't go. You're going to be trapped. And then I honestly think him going back after they escape is what really kicks off the third act. And I'm like, here we go.
So, okay, because we only have about 6 more minutes left before I want us to start to shut it down. Going into the epilogue of this book, which is essentially to me the finale of this book. What did you guys feel? I guess what we should point out is there are moments in the passages of this story where it feels like the voice of the book shifts and it feels like he's talking to you directly. Like he'll use
there's a lot of mentions to you, and I go, who's you?
And the whole time I was reading, I was like, well, who's he talking to? And then I was like, well, I guess we're going to find out. And then by the end, it all comes together. It all makes sense. And we see that Carmen has sacrificed himself in the hope. He has no idea, but Alvaro sacrifices himself in the hope that he can save Carmen somehow. And so then by the end, we come to see that the voice is him talking to Carmen, which I thought was really that's where I started crying.
Well, it's come full circle, right? Because in the beginning, he did what he had to do to preserve himself. Not that it was really much of a choice. His sister was probably going to die anyway. But at the end,
they chopped off her hand. I mean, there was
and then was shedding in the thigh. But he still had to, in his mind, in his own sense of guilt, he traded his sister's life for his.
Yes.
And then at the end, it's the reverse. He's trading his life to save hers.
So I wanted to ask you guys, because there is
time passed, right? Because it talks about Esther, the young
streets
girl,
are empty,
and a young woman. Because Carmen in the book, I mean, her papers say she's 15, but she's actually only 12. I don't know any 12-year-olds that know how to drive. And in the epilogue, it refers to her as a young woman who can. So
they're driving, and also the streets are deserted. So meaning that the entire the way I viewed it, and this entire city has been consumed.
Yeah.
I didn't make that connection that time has passed. I mean, my son's 12.
Well, they talk about
I call
in the
him
book
a young man.
how time gets lost, and I guess when you're in the Alicia, necessarily time doesn't.
Maybe so.
Because they drop hints he disappears. The first time he disappears, he's gone for 24 hours.
Time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and then that's why they're in the kitchen.
So towards the end of the story, Carmen is telling Alvaro that Esther. This is before he has sacrificed himself. When they're whatever, he's seeing all of these people that the Alicia had sucked up, and he was presumably they were gone, they were dead, they're God knows what. But he's seeing all of them at this dining table. Carmen is telling Alvaro that Esther carries her. We all carry each other. One day you'll remember. One day you'll sit with her in a park and you'll see her draw, and you'll remember. Later, as he's dying because he's sacrificed himself in this hope that maybe he can save her, that moment comes back to him, where he's remembering, it's like he's dying, he's lost memory of her by name at least, but he remembers a young woman saying, we all carry each other. So I wanted to ask you guys how you interpret that, what that means to you. We all carry each other.
Memory?
Well, there's the poem of I carry you in your heart. That's always read at funerals. I carry you in your heart, and I carry you always. And especially with the passing of family members, you want to keep their memory alive as much as possible. So there is a reason why, especially Mexicans, they do celebrate Dia de los Muertos, is to keep the memories alive of those who we have lost, of, the pets we've lost, the children that have died, the adults that have died. And it's, how should I describe it? There's I don't know if it's Immanuel Kant or sorry to getting all literal, or Freud, who's says every person that you interact marks you. You take something away and you mark them as well. And it is the instant connection. So once that connection is dead, let's say that person passes away, and then you're oh, but they were always, it's the idea of memory is when anytime I see Guayabera shirts, I always think of my abuelita that passed away. That kind of idea of I grew up in the era of Ronald Reagan, and Jelly Belly is synonymous with him. So when I'm like, oh, my parents live in Fairfield, California, where the Jelly Belly factory is, like, oh, you mean Ronald Reagan's Jelly Belly? Yeah, like that. Kind of like that memory, the memory of that person, their legacy lives on by you mentioning them. And so that's why when they were like, oh, and they talked for days, because they're talking about all the people that they've interacted with, and they're building this world. And that's where I was like, oh my God, we're not going to have a happy ending, are we? But of course it's horror. We're not supposed to have one.
Well, and it kind of makes me think a little bit about, like, this is where we tie in David Lynch. Like, it makes me think a little bit about, like, because he's in interviews and stuff, he's said some really interesting things before in the past about death and dying, and the concept that it's like, it's just a continuum, and it's not necessarily like we shed our physical form, but there's a continuum, and we go on, and at the end of the story, we're all going to be fine. So it's sort of like this idea. And this is where I get so emotional. And I don't know how you guys felt reading the epilogue, but I got emotional reading it, because it is essentially Alvaro talking from whatever, the great whatever, not of this earthly plane anymore, but like the part where he says to her in the epilogue, where he says, a box of keys sat by the abandoned valet station. No one would be coming for any of those cars. The young woman, you, imagine the cars in 100 years, the parking lot swallowed by sand, the cars still waiting for drivers, long gone, long forgotten. We'll be fine, you said. You will, but you don't know that yet. You're just hoping. So it's just like, it's him talking to her.
It reminded me a lot of Blade Runner 2049, when he goes to Las Vegas and this like deserted, where he finds Harrison Ford. The old tech, the old buildings, the part through the epilogue that got me was on the next page, where he says, you'll forget.
Yes.
But I'll come back one night. I'll come back in a dream. I'll tell you everything. You'll dream that the voice you heard is just a voice and not your brother. You'll wonder if I'm lying. You'll count my fingers. You'll remember us. Mom, Dad, Alma, me. We carry each other. But that's years from now. Which the natives and a lot of like especially my family is like, the dad will come and visit you at night in your sleep. And that's the part where I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it was crying.
I was like trying to read this book, and I was like, oh my God, can we do a horror, like can we do a traditional horror book? Like, can we do like Sylvia Montera Garcia's new witch book that's coming out this year for next, the next book club that we're gonna do? I was like, why are you always traumatizing me?
Ron, how did you feel about the epilogue?
Here's kind of how I know, because you're kind of left wondering, well, does Carmen actually get away? Does whoever the little girl is, the first Esther, does she get away? But back on page 272, where Alvaro, is, in his mind, he's thinking, he said, you had little time, that if you wanted to live, you had to find a way out. You had to do your best to leave the orbit of the hotel. And how far away could you go, really? How long could you run down the abandoned dream of Fremont before you ran into other people, before life returned? Alvaro did not know, did you? You'd have to run far. You'd have to find a car and drive, which is exactly what she does.
Dang, I didn't even make that connection, tie that passage to the ending. That's exactly what she does.
That's why I want to read the book again. I did that with Sylvia. I did that. I would definitely just skip chapter 1. Like we're good. We know what's
we've established. We know what happens there. We're good.
Yeah. Once we hit Las Vegas and they're in the park, and I also like how they open up the park of Ellie in the park, and like, I just want to show you guys, nice Las Vegas and like this secluded park, and it comes back because that's like one of the memories he has of him and Carmen together. And I'd recently, part of my book club was a book called Out Cold, and it's about hypothermia. And throughout the book, there's passages of a person experiencing hypothermia, and when the person starts to like lose their vitals, it talks about like they talk about their life flashing before their eyes. And it is especially when Alvaro is like going away, I'm like, please stay with me. Please stay with me. And I turn the page. I'm like, no, why? So, yeah.
Does anybody have any other things unsaid that you want to say about it, or closing thoughts on the book, or any other questions you had?
I would just say for people, power through that first chapter.
Oh, seriously. Or I could just do like a very, very big legal, like, so these things happen. All right, start on page 10,
It's a short first chapter, so just
it is, and
there.
I was like, sweet, we're gonna. It's same. Marcelio started the same way, right? The first chapter was like 5 pages, and I was like, oh, cool. I'm like, all right, cool. They must really love me.
But yeah, I definitely think that someone like Isa Lopez, based on what she did with Tigers Are Not Afraid, which I sobbed. She could really do something.
I was in a theater watching
amazing.
that movie, just like Isa Lopez. If you, maybe we should Senor Juan Martinez, author. Can you do you want to luncheon with Isa Lopez so we can get a movie?
Wait, no, I mean,
thank you at the credit.
And I just realized this, and this may be why Perla, you had not heard of this book. It wasn't like one of the 5, or what is the big 3, big 5, whatever. This was
big 5, yeah.
This was published by the University of Arizona Press, so it was.
Yeah, I noticed that. And then at first, also for my knitting fans, I'm going to show this here. And I was like, where do we have yarn on the cover?
Yeah, I didn't get that either. I was like, I wonder what that's about.
The threads,
and then the
threads,
no, but like that doesn't come till like midway through the book, and I was just like, I wonder why there's red threads on this. And then I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Also, did you notice that once like the book really kicks off and the mother is on her own, the green threads all disappear?
Yeah, yeah.
Because at first, like, oh no, so green is safe, we're fine, and then red. My final thoughts is, that first chapter is like brutal, but Marisol getting filleted, splayed, and the cockroaches like becoming Dracula was traumatizing is the best way, because I hate books like that.
Yes.
But just like her essentially skinning, which the red threads are the people that have been skinned alive. Yeah.
Whatever.
The red threads is the skin. Did you guys pick up on that?
No.
She was making spools of the skin.
Ew.
And then
I will tell
that's
you,
why I think this book is good for rereading, because you would pick up on a lot of
those things.
A lot more of those little things that you may have missed just on first pass through, because I just need to get through this. I just need to get through this.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and it's so interesting, the way in which everyone's perception is different, because by the time we got to Marisol's flaying, for some reason, like my brain could handle that. Maybe because I was just like, this feels so Event Horizon, Hellraiser. This feels so futuristic. Like my brain just processes it differently than it does the real horrors of like what happens in chapter 1, which happens. Yeah. Like that happens. And it's horrific to think about. And I'm sure so does flaying, obviously. But it's just like, for some reason, my brain goes into clinical mode for that, versus with chapter 1, I couldn't go into clinical mode. I was just like, oh my God, this needs to end now. Like, I need this to be over now. It was so gut-wrenching, for lack of a better word.
Another thing I forgot to mention too is the mother, how they entertained her with television, which is why she hummed the Three's Company theme song. So they would bring her out to hunt and kind of be like, give me that one, give me that one, and give me that one. And then they would kind of just sit her in front of the television and she would like watch TV.
We never get to really learn who she is. Like, what is she?
No, we don't. And that's like the biggest, that was my other question. I was like, so we can do a special episode and I'll interview author Juan Martinez.
Yes, please do. Well, and just the closest we get is when Alvaro surmises or connects dots that it wasn't that the Jacob, they're like telling their story wrong. It wasn't that the Alicia or the face beneath the face made them sacrifice their daughters. By sacrificing their daughters, they created the face beneath the face. So,
and then we get the Esters, the little girls, because they mutate out of that kind of like that bargain. And it's the idea of like, what would you what would you do for $1 million? Like, what would you do for eternal life? And these men killed their own kids while Alvaro witnessed his entire family get slaughtered, and he lives because of mistaken identity.
Yes.
And that's why I was like, I hope those men in Seattle really get it, because they really deserve to get it.
So then the Esther that is freed at the end is the first Esther?
Yes.
She's the first. Yeah.
She's the one that they cloned everybody after.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I assumed so, but I just wanted to like make sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the other thing too. Was like, so we're cloning people? Like, what? This isn't horror. This is horror sci-fi.
You really do need to interview the author, because
it really like. Well, I mean, that's not what we do. I have I have zero desire to do interviews just because I don't do that. But I would love to listen to an interview of that of any of the authors that we've covered. But yeah, it's like to what you were saying. It's a story that demands to be visualized. So somebody needs to make a studio exec deal with this for a movie or something. It'd be great.
I think the best thing too is like, when I was reading this book, I always play music, and at first I was playing like kind of like Las Vegas lounge music. But then once like we got into once we got into Three's Company, I'm like, so I'm going to listen to anything from the early 2000s moving forward, because wow, like I'm
like,
never
going to be able to hear that theme song again the same way.
Oh my God. Yeah. I was
we've been waiting for you.
Yeah, it was that. I mean, it was like the way he described it. It's like, it's an old TV show that you've never heard of. And it's always on TV, and you're like, what are you thinking? And when he said it, we've been waiting for you, I was like, is it the Who's the Boss theme song? And then he's like, it's the Three's Company. And I love that it was like the author really was like he answered your question, like, no, it's the Three's Company theme song. So yeah, I guess my final thoughts is definitely like, take care of yourself. Like, I watched Bob's Burgers. I'm gonna probably watch Bob's Burgers again. That's like my comfort show. I'm gonna have my nice husband take me out to drink because it's still 6:00 here. And then just really understand that this is a horror story, but some of the monsters are real and they exist in our world beyond the page.
Yes.
And we live in a world where women are exploited, men and women, sorry, or these people are exploited for little pay. They're exploited to have a roof over their head. They live in this fear. How he talks about like, oh, we can't get Lost and Found involved because they're going to call ICE. And what does B do? Or Winifred's like, oh no, Lost and Found's aware. It's like, yeah, because she knew what happened, and she played dumb.
Yeah.
And not all those smiling faces on the crowd are there for your best judgment. Like my parents used to tell me growing up, like, not everyone's your friend. And I'm like, what does that mean? Oh, you know what that means?
Everyone loves me. Hello.
I'm awesome. No. There's a difference between friends and acquaintances. And these people were the charmers. They were the ones that were hunting to feed the mother, to keep her in what they got into this exchange. And then once they lost control, literally all hell broke loose into the world.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Good book.
It is
I don't have anything to say that hasn't already been said. Yeah. I think it's just, it's a good read. So, okay. Well, let's go into.
And actually hard, because I think some of the book choices we come up with, I wouldn't really call horror necessarily, but this one was.
Well, like straight horror, like there's lots of blendings horror of genres, which is nice. I like the blending of genres, but yeah, this is straight horror.
This is definitely like the Clive Barker. This is in that I can read Clive Barker more than I can watch his movies. Like, I did sit through Hellraiser 1 and 2, and
I've never seen those. I have no desire to see those.
Actually, watch the Joe Bob version, because so think of it like horror movie Mystery Science Theater 3000. So they don't riff during the movie; they play the movie entirely, and then there's interstitials. And he's from Texas, so he's from Austin, or Dallas. And so he'll tell you, he's a big horror fan. So he'll tell you like, oh, this is what happened in this movie, or this actress you might remember from this, or that person you saw in the background, that was so and so's first movie who won an Oscar, stuff like that. Like you'll get more tidbits, so you can have like the part. You can be like talk about the movie at a party, as I like to think about it.
Yeah.
But it is nice to give me a break because Hellraiser 1 and 2 is holy shit, that is a ride. But the one thing I did want to share was when and you can totally share those vacation photos, was like one thing I noticed in Las Vegas, like that's the city never sleeps, but between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the morning, and this because I got in really late, it gets really eerie outside in Las Vegas. And like I'm sitting in my hotel room, and what I'm seeing outside, I was like, oh, we just need to close the curtains. Because it was just like the stuff that I saw, I was just like, I don't even know how to describe. Like people were like walking around with like very little clothing, but it was because of the heat. It wasn't because they were like trying to like be those showgirls that they dress up. Like no, they were just hot.
Yes.
And you could see it in their face how red they were, and I'm like, how can you be red in the face and it's like so late at night? But Las Vegas definitely has like this really odd energy. And especially when I was at Fashion Show Mall, I was just like, this place reminds me of Tijuana, and I'm being kind when I describe it. It's just a really odd. It's got some vibes, and it's definitely got like the haunted, casino vibe to it, like the one I showed you the photo.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. All right.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Stays in Vegas. There you go.
Unless you bring it back where you're infected.
There you go.
All right. We can go on, I guess, into like our closing segment, where I kind of really wanted us to sort of do a quick elevator pitch of things we want to recommend to listeners. This does not need to be horror based. It can be whatever, something you're watching, listening, reading, whatever. So, like for me, I'll go first. For me, I want to recommend, I've really been getting into, if you have Apple TV, I'm late to the party, but I've really been getting into the show Bad Sisters, which is kind of this dark comedy of like, it's set in Ireland. It's these 5 Irish sisters. The premise is that like one of them has this piece of crap husband, and the other 4 essentially off him. And so, and I'm not giving anything away by telling you that, like, that is that's where we start. And then the whole story is like, can they get away with it? Like what happens in the unfolding of this? But it's rooted around these 5 Irish sisters, and it's really interesting. I'm liking it so far. So that's my recommendation. Perla, did you have?
One of my Yeah, so I enjoy that show too. One of my friends was the sister with the eye patch. I always forget her name. She was her for Halloween, and that's how I got introduced to that show. Because I was just like, "Why are you dressed up like Cuna de Lobo?" She's like,
Who are
"What?"
you?
I was like, "I'm like, oh wait, I forgot. You don't speak Spanish. You don't know Cuna de Lobo. So why a woman in an eye patch would like scare the living shit out of you?" So yeah, that is a good show. So I recommend that. I am actually in the middle of January Giallo before David Lynch passed away, and I've just been watching his movies over and over again. But I would recommend to look up a Mario Bava movie or a Dario Argento movie. Suspiria is my favorite. It's considered the last and final Giallo. Or Filomena.
Okay.
Watch those because it is. I love Suspiria for 2 reasons. One, it's a creepy ballet gothic movie, and number 2, it was the last movie ever made on Technicolor film, and they used the palette of Snow White for the movie. Yeah. So, and then for books, I recommend, if you want to light read, The Wedding People. This is before I got married. I read it in the fall. Just a cute little ladies fiction. You could like 200, 300 pages. You can read it, and it's just about a person going to a wedding reception and all the drama that comes around with it. And as someone who was always the guest, never the bride until recently, it's just a cute little fun book to just I like to cycle through books, so I already have like my next little fun book. And then also just reach out to your local bookstores. There is plenty of Latinx authors releasing a lot of horror this year, and just turn off the news. Stay informed, definitely, but like don't obsess over it. Like just
no. Yeah.
We just yeah. So that's my plug, and then I'll plug my book club later.
Yes. Right after this, Ronnie, what did you have? What did you want to recommend?
I got nothing. Since I was recently hired as a dance fitness instructor. I've been given like 30 routines that I have to learn. So that's what's been eating up a lot of my
fun
afternoon. No, it's stressful. Maybe that's why I've not been sleeping well lately. I'm kind of freaked out. So between that and studying for the National Group Fitness Instructor Certification, I'm a little stressed. So, but this is the middle grade book that I did pick up as a kind of palate cleanser to be a little bit more light and fluffy. Not that middle grade books can't deal with heavy, serious topics. They can, but this one, Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston is.
I feel like
I've heard some adult booktubers that really enjoyed this book. So
I'll have to look. I feel like my oldest might have.
He likes to read.
Yeah, I feel like he might have. Is it a series?
I believe it's a trilogy, and I think the third book's already out.
I feel like he might have something. That cover looks like elements of that cover look familiar to me. So okay, cool. Well, Perla, what is going on coming up next for you, the book club?
So we have hit 55 members in the Morbid Curiosity West Seattle chapter. Dude. I know when I hit 50, I was like, I am having champagne. And considering my first month, I only had like 15 members, and that was in 15. September.
That's still good, great, I think.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. And then also thank you for letting me or announcing that the most listened was the episode I was on.
Yes.
I've shared that with my fellow Undertakers. So shout out to all my fellow Undertakers. They were very excited. They all were like, you did a great job and the hosts were great. We found a new podcast. So you got, I thank for the unity of both the love of horror and the morbidly curious groups for coming together. So right now we're reading this book called the All That Is Wicked, and it is about a gentleman whose brain is the most studied brain in criminal psychology, and it is because he massacred an entire family and lied, and this is where the word sociopath came from, and all these. It is a good
his own family or just another family.
No, he killed his wife, his daughter, father-in-law,
family annihilator.
Just total, yeah. And he was just some scam artist from Canada.
Wow.
So yeah, and then the author actually reads the book, so that's when I really like reading the audiobook, is because the author is telling you, and so you get the cadence, you get the excitement and so forth. And then next month is Tremors in the Blood, which is about the birth of the lie detector, and I already have all my Maury Povich memes ready to go, because during the pandemic I would watch Maury Povich every lunch, and I would skip the baby daddy episodes and always watch the lie detector episodes. And then we're in September's book, is one I really want to plug. It is about
y'all plan in advance.
Yeah, we get a year's notice. The September book is about the female periodistas, journalists in Mexico City that were killed. So that one's I'm really excited for. So find your local chapters, or awesome. Just definitely. I really like that it's like it is nonfiction, and yes, there is some lighter subjects that we do read, but like we have the Waco Rising coming up in April. But I mean, this Tremors in the Blood, I'm really excited about, because like I work in law, so like lie detectors are inadmissible. People still willingly take them, and just the idea that they've been proven to be junk science.
Yeah,
I think I would fail them because I'd be so nervous about like, you gotta stay calm so you don't
be calm
as you're lying or being untruthful. But
yeah, or they use them as like Vanity Fair has the can you tell a lie, where they'll hook people up to lie detectors to see if they're telling the truth.
The celebrity, what
always not cracks me up, but I find funny when I'm like watching Dateline episodes is like almost always the detectives that are interviewing the suspects will like be, well, and then he lawyered up, which was really suspicious. I'm like, why? Like what
is he supposed to do?
Rights. Yeah,
right.
They're lawyering up because they watch Dateline.
Yeah, you read them their Miranda rights, which is you have a right to a lawyer. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to use that rights. Thanks.
Yeah. But apparently that makes you look suspicious in the eyes of the police.
It's like the people who gun down innocent people, typically, like in a lot. I'm thinking specifically of instances where people of color that have been Black people who have been gunned down by people. And they're like, well, why was he running? I was like, because you're chasing him with a gun. Like, what do you think he would do? Like, He looked also.
Right. I was afraid for my life. He was running the opposite direction of you. So unless he was like figured out how to, yeah. But yeah, so that's been the book club's been a lot of fun. I actually had a few businesses. Like there's this one bar called Two Finger Social that is a horror bar in Seattle, and they reached out to me like, "Hey, we would love to host your book club." And I'm like,
"Oh, how cool!
That is awesome!
That is cool.
Yeah, and then I actually had filmed a music video for one of my directors that I met at a David Lynch festival of all things. And so I was just like, "Oh, cool! I've been to the bar," so I just thought it was like, "Oh, cool! This cool bar wants to host me and my book club people." So yeah, so definitely like reach out to your local chapters. I know there's one in Dallas, but there are like just go to the bookclub.org .club app. I think it's .org, and just like look in. But yeah, so that is it. And then if we wanted to do a little bit talking about David Lynch, because I can't process it up.
Well, I don't know if we're all out of time, but if you had to tell people like what's your go-to David Lynch recommendation for people?
For people, if you've never seen a David Lynch movie, where would you?
So I have the order. You should watch him. Yeah. Okay. So Elephant Man, Straight Story, Wild at Heart, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Twin Peaks, the series 1 and 2, Fire Walk with Me, Twin Peaks, Missing Pieces, Twin Peaks, The Return, and then end it all with Inland Empire.
Inland Empire?
That's how you watch. Inland Empire is the last one.
I haven't heard of Inland Empire.
The other ones, yes,
it was released in 2006. The title is A Woman in Trouble, and it is 3 hours of a woman in trouble. And it was also done in Digicam.
Is it Laura Dern? Yeah.
Laura Dern, Justin Theroux is in it. And then, of course, the main cast of David Lynch, mainstays. But definitely, Mulholland Drive has been his most successful. It was the one that he was nominated for the Oscar for. Wild at Heart. And Mulholland Drive both won the Plum Door. But yeah, I can make you a list of how to watch David Lynch. David Lynch is like, he was such a quirky guy. Oh, and then Eraserhead. You might want to watch Eraserhead before you go into Twin Peaks. Yeah, I forgot about that. So I'll make you a list. But yeah, it is. David Lynch is just I built a friendship that is celebrating 26 years this year, because we would go home after I got off my job at retail and we would watch Lost Highway and make candy for the rave we were going to that weekend, and listen to Depeche Mode in the car. He was such a quirky guy. He was like my weirdo director, but he was everybody's weirdo. But he also had a way of like making electricity sound loud.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So
and
then Blue Velvet. Yeah. So but yeah, I'll give you guys a big list of like how to watch
give me the rundown. Give me the order of what you just said, and then we will put it up. We'll post it on social media for people. Like, this is the order of David Lynch. David Lynch that you should go in.
Yeah, David Lynch. That would be a really good drag name, wouldn't it? So the way you watch David Lynch is, let me see, is The Elephant Man, The Straight Story, Wild at Heart, Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Eraserhead, Twin Peaks, the pilot, Twin Peaks Season 1, Twin Peaks Season 2, Fire Walk with Me, Twin Peaks Missing Little Pieces, Twin Peaks The Return, and then you watch Inland Empire.
Yeah.
In that order. I can type it up and send it to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know you guys are out of time, because I just realized like, oh, it's almost 9 o'clock there. I'm like, it's early for me. But thank you again. I appreciate you guys. When you guys were like, do you want to do another book club episode? I'm like, yes, please don't. But I would love to. I really enjoy these. Witches was a fun one. I read that when I was actually in Chicago, when I was traveling. It was a really good time. But yeah, I really, congratulations on 40 episodes. Holy shit. Wow.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
It's always a blast to have you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We will be announcing the next book pick in the days to come. So if you are following us on social media, we are Don't Watch At Night Pod on all social media. I don't know what's happening with TikTok.
Skin flaying. Oh yeah,
we'll see. I don't know what's happening with TikTok, but whatever.
Oh, they just shut it down. I just got the alert on the media.
This country, we can't ban assault weapons, but we can ban a social media app.
Isn't that the truth right there? Yeah. Yeah, it was, I was, so this is just going to sound odd. I'm too much of a vieja when like TikTok started like, I'm too old for a new app. So it's going to end up on Instagram anyways. That was my whole viewpoint.
Well, and that's like the thing. Everybody's like, you're leaving TikTok, jump to this, Y, and Z. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, I'm not bouncing to another video app. It was everything we did. It took all we had just to get on TikTok. And now you want us to jump to, I'm exhausted.
The fact that I made a reel for my wedding is like, bravo.
Next level.
Yeah. I'm like, that's why I love Instagram. It's like, it's just pictures.
Just pictures. Okay. So we will be posting stuff about our book, the next book club pick coming up in the days to come. We'll also be talking about our next movie selection. If you're not part of our Patreon, we encourage you listeners to join. It's free to join, $3 to unlock all the extra stuff. We do have some stuff coming up. We do have a watch party that Veronica and I are trying to nail down in February for Crimson Peak. So if you want to join us.
I love that movie. I've seen the costumes, and I'll send you the photos of me when I saw the Del Toro exhibit in Los Angeles, and that's what made me go home and like watch that movie.
Yes,
the costumes that Jessica Chastain wear are so detailed that I was like, oh, I got to watch this movie. What was I sleeping on?
Right. So. It is a perfect February movie. So we're going to try and nail that down for a watch party for Patreon folks to join us on. So please, if you're not part of it, go join it. We'll link it in show notes. But that's everything we've got right now. So thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye. Bye. Don't Watch at Night is a Nest production hosted by me, Veronica, and Valerie. Editing by Valerie. Music by Omar Chakor. Production support for this episode provided by Lorenzo Villarreal and Alex Street. Listen to new episodes of Don't Watch at Night every other Monday, and don't forget to give us a rate and review. It's the best way to help us grow.